Hey guys, it's Kat. And I'm gonna be trying to do a call-in show. Um, I've had first of all, I'm gonna do a whole introduction that I'm gonna actually edit and everything. But first of all, I want to apologize for being late. I was a whole hour late. Today has been a clusterfuck of a day. So many things have been going wrong. So I've just been all over the place. Um, and I will apologize for that. um I also, part of why I was late is because this app only exists on iPhone, and I do have an iPhone and I hate it. So I basically have only ever opened it in the past couple of months to do this. And yeah, that's why I was late, because I had to update it for like hours on end. So let me get myself comfortable. I really appreciate this and podcasting in general, because like I can not be on camera, and that means I'm a little bit more comfortable. But I am still figuring out all this stuff and how it works. So please bear with me. Do I sound okay? I see there's some people in here. Do I sound okay? I see that it's this app is so new and different. I can see comments. Hello, everybody. Hey, Kenya, Freelink, Caramel Delight, Sherbert. Hey, Eric, Pierre, Allen. That's a regular. Okay, I sound okay. Great. Um, so like I said, still figuring out how to use this. It was really helpful for me the first time I did this to not see the chat. um, ooh, I can do that and I won't see the chat. Okay, great. Now I have an option. All right, so um, I guess I'm gonna take a sip of this and then I'm gonna do my whole intro into everything. Thank you so much for bearing with me. Thank you so much for dealing with this messy ass experience in the way that we are. um you know it's all over the place, but I'm going to edit it into something nice for the podcast. So I guess we should start this now. Oh, hey, Swoobot. All right, so I'm going to hide the chat just so I don't get too distracted by it. So I will apologize if I'm not reacting to your chat things. I'm sorry, but I'm going to do the introduction and then we're going to open the lines. And yeah, so I'm going to hide the chat. Ooh, I don't know what I just did. Okay. Well, all right, this hides the chat, hopefully. Oh, wait, actually, before I start ranting, you guys can still hear me, right? I did a hide the chat thing, but this app is all new, so I apologize. You guys still? Oh wait. Okay, great. People are saying yes. Okay, so I can hide the chat that way then. All right. So we're going to be having a conversation today. Okay, let me do the actual intro. Like I said, I'm editing this after, so. Hey guys, it's Kat, and it's time for another episode of True Tea. But this time we are doing a call in version of True Tea, where I have you guys call in and have conversations with me about the topic of the week, which was the conversation around male privilege and transgender women. Obviously, this is a very complicated conversation, and we actually had some really, really, really good comments on this video. So I'm looking forward to the call-in show to sort of see if some of the comments reflect some of the stuff that we talked about. Some of the calls rather reflect some of the stuff we talked about in the comments, because I do think that this was a really, really interesting conversation. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start by giving you guys a really quick summary of my feelings. Then I'm going to go and read some comments that I found quite interesting, and then I'm going to open up the calls to everybody. Okay. So, oh, and also, sum up what I'm going to say, there are definitely some things that I could have added to the video, conversations that I could have expanded on. So we're going to do a bit of that, and then we're going to open up the calls. So, um, this week we're having a conversation about male privilege, because it's often something that is said to be something that transgender women have, right? And personally, for me, I've always had a complication with that conversation because of how young I transitioned. In the video, in the podcast rather, I'm gonna have to get used to saying that. In the podcast of this week, I do discuss that I do not believe that my socialization is exactly like a cis woman's. Um, Young cis girls are raised in a way where their biology is a really, really big part of the way that they have access to the world. And I know for a fact that when I was younger, there was a bit more freedom that I was given that my cis counterparts were not given. And so I know that has definitely colored some aspects of my life, and I will never sit here and deny that, right? But one of the things I say in the podcast is that while I hold that to be true, I also don't, in my from my own personal experience, believe that because that is true, that my experience is exactly that as a cis man's. It just isn't. Um, my experience growing up was one where I was often read as a young girl, but I didn't have the um, I guess you could say I'm saying protection, even though this is not quite the right word, and it's also a very patriarchal protection. That's another conversation. But long story short, there were a lot. There's I had a bit more freedom, but I also wasn't understanding why I was being sexualized, for example, why men were so eager to spend time with me, um, why there were certain situations I was in where I wasn't understanding exactly why people were dismissing me. Um, so that's kind of my experience. And I talked about Caitlyn Jenner in my last video because I think she is a good example of what I think some people assume is true for all transgender women, because a lot of the popular stories that you hear about transgender women is that they live a fairly long portion of their lives being taken and seen and handled and treated as cis men, even though they're not. And then they transition. And I think that there are some people who have a hard time parsing that there was nothing positive that came to a transgender woman's life because she at one point in time was able to pass as a man and be seen as a man. Now, we talked about this in the podcast, but I don't really, and this is we're going to say this up front, I don't really think that it's correct to describe being a closeted woman who is being read as a cis man as privileged. I don't think that that's the right word. I think the privilege is a very, very tricky, slippery word in this context. And I think that, and I feel that way because obviously being closeted and being taken as the gender that you're not is not a privilege, right? I don't think that that's a privilege. And there were some people that were upset with me in the comments because they thought that that's exactly what I was saying. However, that all being said, I can't ignore the fact that I have never in my life been able to be seen as a man and be treated as a man and receive preferential treatment because I was seen as a man. And it's actually very fascinating and curious to me how people would make that assumption about me because it's just not true. Um, if I could reference a part of my life where I was being treated like a man and I I would have, especially at this point in my life, I would have no problem, coping to that or copping to that rather. I'd have no problem acknowledging that and, pointing out that yes, in this one situation or these several situations, I was, being getting preferential treatment, so to speak, because I was being seen as a man. That's just not ever been my case. And so I have a lot of complications when we have this conversation because I think it's a really complicated conversation that people summarize really, really um, way too much, way, way, way too much. Because so one of the things that I didn't say in my podcast that I wish I'd kind of said or made clearer is a lot of people were pointing out Caitlyn Jenner. She is somebody who has a lot of class privilege. She has a lot of money, right? And because she has a lot of money, she's very privileged and then is able to not have certain experiences, right? But my whole thing with Caitlyn Jenner is I don't believe that she would have that wealth if she had competed as a trans woman way back when. Um, I think that her life would be dramatically different if that were the case for her. I think that we wouldn't be having half of the conversations we're having about her if that were the case. She would likely get very rejected, be very, very much ousted. She would not be seen favorably, and she would not have been able to build the wealth she has now that makes her transition a bit easier. Easier, I'm using that in quotations as well, because much like previous words we've already said here, that's not really true either. It wasn't easy for Caitlyn Jenner to be closeted and to, um, not be herself for years and years and years. But I point this out, and I reference bi erasure in this context in so-called straight passing privilege, which the next podcast is going to be about actually. Because there's kind of a parallel here, because there's a parallel conversation about so-called straight passing privilege that bi people have, right? And of course, describing a bi person who is a very cis normative cis person, usually dating another cis normative cis person, that being read as straight is not really privilege, but it does mean that they manage to navigate through the world in a way where they are a bit safer than they would if they were in what was obviously a gay relationship. Um, and again, we're gonna whole podcast about that. I've already recorded it, and y'all can feel free to disagree with me. But as a trans woman who is read as a cis woman and does do quite a bit of dating, I know that I don't ever feel any sort of weird, um, you know, hate or disgust or anything towards me when I'm out with a man, because most people look at us and they see a man and a woman, a straight relationship. There's no bias that I'm, experiencing, or things that I have to walk around. Um, Whereas I have gay friends who are terrified of holding the friend, holding their holding hands with their partner. They're terrified of being, affectionate with people that they love, because they know that it is dangerous for them. And so I look at that and I know that to some degree, I'm able to survive in a way some people aren't because of my situation. And even though it's not a direct parallel, I think that there's a bit of a parallel here, because I really don't believe that I believe that Caitlyn Jenner's life would be very, 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 very different if she came out as a trans woman way back when. And I think that there's lots of nuance to this conversation, because, someone like myself who transitioned young, which is for a lot of people the preferable position to be in. And I think I glossed over that a bit too much in the video. I think most people who wait to transition would probably prefer to be able to, um, you know, be young and transition and pass for most of their life and all that stuff. That's obviously the preferable position to be in. And I will always say that I'm very privileged when it comes to that. Wow, my words today. I don't know what's going on. Um, but I know that, I was never able to, not transition and get a job and build up money to make my transition easier. It just kind of happened, and I sort of struggled for years and years and years and years and years because I was out as a trans woman. Um, and I've only recently, at 30, been able to do stuff that people were doing when they were, 17. And this got brought up in my life again, because I have somebody who I went to high school with who recently came out to me as a trans woman, and we went to the same school, we're in the same year, we're in a lot of the same classes with each other, and I've watched them go on and live at least what I've seen. And maybe, and somebody pointed out in the comments that this might not have been the case, but what has seemed to me like a very happy, productive life, where they've been gainfully employed. They've been able to do so many things. They work in corporate America, they've worked a bit in the animation industry, and they've been able to sort of embody not just a man, but like a very idealistic cis white hetero man, even though he's also, well, not he, she, they're not also, she's not that at all. It's hard to talk about transition when you're talking about people in the past. So it was interesting to me to have that experience where, like, I had the same exact path with this person, not the same exact, obviously, but we came from the same foundation, and they were able to go one way. And I've watched their success. I've watched how, financially well they've been doing. And I've been struggling until fairly recently. And so it was interesting to me till that they, when they came out as trans, because we just had completely different experiences. And even back then, I was not able to go and get a regular job flipping burgers because I was a trans kid. And back then, especially back when I was applying, and this was, early 2000s, there really weren't employment protections. We were not having the conversations about trans people that we're having today. And so I dealt with a lot of me being laughed out of places of employment. I had a lot of situations where I worked under the table. You guys know that I worked with this artist in LA. That was like my first kind of, consistent job in the art field. And that was an under table job. The dude was a fucking pedo. And I got assaulted. And that was like my options back then for making money was doing some weird shit with a guy so that I could survive. Sorry. And so that's my situation. And that was my situation. And so I've noticed that for me, at least, it has been hard for me, even though I understand it's not necessarily the most idealistic position to be. It has been hard for me to engage with people who I know have, at the very least, been able to seem like a man in society, come out, and especially come out and ask me for resources and stuff, because that's often what ends up happening. Um, is they'll want me to be, their support system, and their you know, what's the word? They want me to be their mentor in so many ways. And like it's hard for me to process, because I support everybody in finding their truth. But I don't have much in common with somebody who's lived that way. I really don't. And so I wanted to have this conversation because I do think it's a complicated one, and I think that people really try to oversimplify it. And I think that saying that transgender, I mean, so I didn't say this, but let's say this. I think that it's obviously an attempt to misgender trans women when they say transgender women have male privilege. And I think the reason why this conversation is so complicated is because this is a conversation often being had by transphobes. Transphobes are often trying to say that trans women are just men, and that all of these things that trans women do are just, you know, further examples of male entitlement and da 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 da. And so I think the conversation's hard for that reason. That most of the times when we talk about this, it's because a transphobe is having this conversation, right? But it is hard for me to not see something to the fact that I was not able to be taken as a man in society. And so what that meant for me is that I had to struggle quite a bit for a long time, and often deal with being exploited, and rejected and all these other things, simply because I was a trans person who was out. Um, so I guess that's a summary. It's a really sloppy summary. I'm sorry that that was all over the place. I'm not feeling amazing today. I drank way too much yesterday. um, I went on a date yesterday, and it was a fun one, but Jesus Christ, I might have had a few too many. So I'm recovering today, so please bear with me. And side note, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow morning, um, and I'm not ready for that. Okay, so I think that's a decent summary. There were some really good comments. There was actually a really great comment that somebody left but deleted. And I never know if it's YouTube that deletes it, or if it's it. 'Cause sometimes sometimes people will delete stuff on their own, but a lot of times stuff will get it'll get removed by YouTube. So I never know if it's like what it is. But somebody left a really really great comment in response to this stuff, and let me see if I can find it, and I'm gonna read it to you guys. um so I want to read you two really good comments. So this person says, So I think there's some nuance that you really lost when it comes to trans women who decide to stay in the closet. Yes, we definitely have inherited privilege from the length of time we were in the closet. But while we can be more successful than those that transition in their teens or 20s, being closeted comes with its own problems. We're alienated from a lot of people that would understand us best, and alienated from the people, um, try as we might, that we can't relate to. We routinely battle feelings of low self-esteem and suicide, which at least in my case caused me to ignore the health care that my privilege made made so easy to access. And we're often looked over for employment or leadership positions because we often come off different no matter what we do. It also doesn't account for the reasons why we remain in the closet, which is rarely about retaining our privilege. Most often, it's because we care so deeply about our friends and families that we sacrifice our own interests just to keep them in our lives. And this is especially true in this moment of older trans women. In my case, it's because I was literally tortured as a kid for being feminine, to the extent that I buried my feelings so deep and couldn't feel anymore. The moment I realized I was trans and that I wouldn't be beaten for living that truth, I was every bit as committed to coming out as you were, and in the process, experienced employment discrimination. Um, uh, I had a, to do two screenshots for this, and in the process, experienced employment discrimination, lost my marriage and my chosen family. None of us have the kind of privilege Caitlyn Jenner has, and you do call that out in your podcast, but then you go to paint us with a brush that's only slightly less broad than the one you rightfully dressed her down with. Have I benefited from decades of male privilege? Absolutely. And do I still benefit from white privilege? You bet I do. But I trade it all in just to have transitioned the moment I left my parents' house and get those 20 years back. I would be so much better than regretting that I didn't make the choice I wasn't aware was even an option back then. So I really like that comment because it really I love when I talk about something and then somebody from that experience comes and shares their thing. Side note, I've stood up. I don't know if you guys know, but it's really hard for me to film sitting down sometimes unless I have a script. So I'm standing up right now. So if I sound different, that's why. Hopefully I still sound okay. I'm not looking at the chat. Um, but I thought this is really a really great comment. And but one of the things I will share here is that when I read, so there's two things I thought when I read this. The first thing I recognized almost immediately is that I've noticed that, because I've had this conversation many times just simply from my perspective as somebody who transitioned young and was literally never able to enter the workforce. Like, you know, I had a couple of jobs, um, like I said, mostly under the table. I had one job working as a telemarketer. Some dude that I was seeing at the time who was a fucking pedo helped me get the job. Um, and I was able to, within that situation, be sort of hush hush about being trans because the boss knew, and I would tell him my legal name and everything so that he would put it on my checks and stuff. But people in the office did not know, and it wasn't a conversation. But that was the only like official legal job I ever had, where I had to pay taxes and things on it. But it wasn't that was it. That was the most I've ever been able to enter the workforce. And so I wanted to just point out, when we're having this conversation, that one of the things that I react to when we talk about this is just literally the fact that I was never able to do half of that stuff. When people talk about, like, so for example, there's a huge portion of the internet dedicated to transitioning on the job, right? And I know that not everybody has the foresight to understand that they're trans, and that oftentimes getting a job is the more immediate thing than transition. But I've had a hard time identifying with transitioning on the job content for years because I've never had that job. I was just never given the opportunity to be employed and work um as pre-transition, or or before I transitioned young, but you know what I mean. I never had to deal with that hurdle because I was never actually employed. I never was able to even sort of step in there. And the impression I had when I would go and apply for these jobs way back in the day was that they almost saw me as like a um what's the word I'm looking for? A risk. It's not the word I'm looking for. There's a better word for it, but I think especially back then, people interacted with trans people and they just said, "Oh, they're crazy." Like that's it, And I remember the times where I would apply for work and I would write my legal name down on my paperwork because I thought that that's like what I had to do. And like the look of shock and sometimes disgust and confusion they would look at my name and look up at me. It was like just being trans. It just like disqualified me immediately. And so, sometimes when I read some of this stuff, it's like, God, I've never even been able to be in a position where I lost my job because I came out as trans, because I was already out as trans, and they never, it was always impossible for me to be employed that way. I talked about this a couple of times, but I'm a YouTuber for many, many reasons, but one of the big reasons I'm a YouTuber is because this was the only fucking job I could work. For the longest time, this was the only fucking job I could work. By the time I changed my name and my gender marker, I'd applied to a bunch of jobs and it was so crazy to me how changing my name and my gender marker literally made my entire life significantly easier, because now I was applying for work at places and they were not um there was that incongruence didn't exist anymore, and they were just taking me as Catherine, a woman, and I was getting hired at places. Unfortunately, around that time I also started working in the animation industry, so that became less relevant. But um I haven't been able to enter the workforce the way that most people have. And so I'm very happy and very fortunate and thankful that I have the platform that I have today. But I do think it's important to point out that I might not even have been able to build the platform that I have had I not dealt with employment discrimination, that literally made it so that I wasn't able to work even the most normal of jobs, McDonald's, Burger King, any fast food, just I wasn't taken in. Now, I will also say that I do think that things are a lot different now. I do see more trans kids getting hired in places, and there are employment, protections. And sometimes when I have this conversation, I think, fuck, am I having it from a really out of date perspective? I don't really know. Because I do think things are quite a bit different these days. But still, we're talking about my perspective here on this. So I have my experience and it colors the way that I talk about it. But anyway, another thing that comes to mind when I read these comments is a lot of times, and this is I don't want to spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about this, but so common when I get these comments from older transitioners, um, they're almost always white, almost always. Um, I know for a fact that there are, people of color who come out later in transition. And in the times where I've had this conversation in the past, I have interacted with a couple of people who are in that position. But it's to me, it's really interesting how a lot of times when we talk about this, when I see um, the people who come forward, they're almost always white trans women, almost always. And if you go through the comments on the podcast video, that's pretty much the case. It's pretty much entirely white trans women. And I appreciate the acknowledgement of white privilege there, of course, because there is privilege there too. Um, that comes on top of it. But I don't know. I don't know. Like I thought about this a bit because somebody left a comment like this. I think one of the comments. Actually, I think it might have even been the top comment. Let me see if it's the top comment. Um, let me see. Also, thank you for bearing with me with this new this new format, y'all. I'm trying new things, and I don't always. Stop! 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 I this is new for me, so I'm still figuring it all out. Okay, so okay, it's not the top comment, but somebody left a comment that was like, it was something along the lines of, let's be real. When you contrast a Black trans woman's access to privilege pre transition with a white trans woman's access to privilege pre transition, um, Black trans Black trans women have really less of an ability to take advantage of said privilege in quotations, and so maybe that's why you see more um, Black trans women transitioning younger, and you don't see as many um, later in life trans folks. I don't know. I don't know. It was just an interesting thought to ponder on. I don't really, again, this is just me thinking. I don't actually have the answer. Um, I thought that it was kind of interesting because I have noticed that that's very much the overrepresentation of who I tend to have this conversation with. It's usually white trans women. And here's the thing, and I don't this is another point that I didn't really lay out as clearly in the video in the podcast. Um I don't think there's really anything wrong with being realistic about the way that things are and holding off your transition so that you can transition in a safe way. Some of you guys know that when I talk about coming out, I'm not one of those people that says you should just come out and fuck everybody else and, you know, do it and just, fuck yeah and, rah rah. As much as I would like to say that, I'm also very realistic and I know that coming out is really fucking hard. It's really fucking scary. And some people come out and they get completely disowned. Some people come out and they lose their jobs. They lose any bit of stability in this world. And I will never, ever, ever shame somebody for holding on to things that make them feel safe. Um, I think that people like to do that a lot, but I don't think that that's reasonable. So I'm definitely not interested in shaming um, people who transition later in life or describing them as somebody digested what I was talking about as me calling them cowards. That's definitely not how I feel. I think in this like deeply transphobic society, we've seen so many examples that tell you that being trans in this world is fucking dangerous. Being trans in this world is fucking scary. So I don't shame people for not just transitioning because it is fucking scary. And if you've heard half of the stories I told you guys here, you know that I've had a really scary life. I've had a lot of really sort of unpleasant experiences where things things are very 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 um dire and scary for me. I've been in a lot of fucked up scenarios. So I'm not at all saying that you need to do that and that that's this and that. I should have made that more clear. I know something that I was thinking about today was I remember reading a lot about people on I used to be part of the Yahoo groups. I don't know that I don't think that's a thing anymore, but there used to be these like trans Yahoo groups. Um, and they were specifically about transitioning and they were specifically about hormones and exchanging information about hormones and dosages and picture updates and all these other things. And it was really really common to find the trans woman who is still presenting themselves as a man for survival, um, quietly taking hormones and doing sort of quiet feminization procedures in order to feminize themselves to the point where they could come out and be, in quotations, passable enough um, to come out as trans and be taken as their gender. That was very, very common. Um, and Caitlyn did that too. Caitlyn did have like quiet sort of feminization procedures here and there, and then eventually came out as a trans woman. And I guess just like for me, I never saw that as an option. Because I was never able to. I feel like if I were, I guess, going from this comment, maybe if I were in a situation where I got a job and I knew that um they only accepted me in that one narrow way. Um if I was in a situation where I felt bonded to something enough to where I felt like I had to maintain um a certain persona for survival, who knows, things might have been very, very different for me. But I guess because I wasn't under that pressure, I didn't exactly fall on that path. So, you know, again, I'm not going to shame anybody for holding off transition because it's what was safer for them or what made more sense for them. That's not at all what it's about. Really, what I was just talking about is I just think it's strange for people to deny that there's something that trans women who have been able to do that have been able to have access to that I have not. Because personally, I do, I do think that, again, I don't think male privilege is the right word. I don't think that's the right word at all. Um, but I do think that there's something positive that comes in this society to being read as a cis man. I do think that there's, a little bit of, safety and protection that comes with that was not afforded to me. Um, she mentions in her comment, in her comment, not being taken seriously and things like that too. And I get that, because a lot of the comments I got were like, some people mentioned that they were very sort of like feminine men who weren't really seen as men or weren't really accepted as men because they weren't, um, they weren't performing masculinity in a certain way. And I find that interesting, because I'm not going to say that there's not something there, because, toxic masculinity and pressuring men to maintain this image, that's a very real fucking thing that I will never deny, right? But I don't know. I don't feel like I don't feel like the most feminine of man that's out there is is still not taken more seriously than a woman. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's that's the same thing. If that I don't know if I'm even saying that right, but you know what I mean. I feel like, yes, there's definitely people who get punished for not entertaining masculine ideals, right? That's a thing for sure. But there are also people who literally aren't even who, first of all, aren't under the pressure to maintain those masculine ideals, because they're not even looked at to begin with. And that's just, I think, like, one of the things that I felt and still feel so much as a woman is just being overlooked and not, like, at all um seen as a person who has control of their situation. Like, fuck, like I said, I went on a date last night, and it was just so interesting, like, how common I mean, I've had this experience several times, where I'm out with a man and they'll speak just to the man. They will barely acknowledge me, barely interact with me. Um, but they'll speak just to him. And I kind of have to, like, get their attention to be like, hey, I'm here too, kind of thing. And, like, that's an experience that I've had throughout my life. So I don't know if it's exactly the same, but anyway, that's my recap, and also reading one of the questions. I realize we've been talking for so long, and I don't want to be here for too long. So I'm gonna open up the calls for people to call in, and then I'm gonna look over the comments, because, like I said, I've been hiding the comments. So let me see. Fan line, is that open? Kat, I really think this is a case where you need to stay in your lane. Ooh. Oh no, these comments are getting cut off on this app. That's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. Oh my God. Some of these comments, I'm sure y'all are leaving some long, good comments, but this app cuts off the comments. That's very frustrating. It's very, very frustrating. Money privilege. We are using DL. as not as trans, not deal in terms of God. I hate that this is cut off. I'm glad that we're having call-ins because there's so many comments that are getting cut off and I can't read half of them. Um, that's really frustrating. That's really frustrating. But just so that I'm caught up. When people are when this person says stay in my lane, what do you mean by that? And what lane am I not like? What lane am I out of? I'm very curious. Which lane am I not in? Which lane should I be you know what lane should I be in and what lane have I stepped into on accident? Ooh, I should pin the number. Ooh, let me do that. Thank you for telling me that. Can I do that in here? No. Oh my god, no. Why can't I pin the number? Um, I'm assuming this is popping up as a live stream. If one of the moderators could do that, Beef Cat, I would love it if you did that for me. Let me see. Yeah, I'm very confused by the stay in your lane conversation. Because I'm a trans ass woman. Like I don't know like what lane am I not should I be in? Is passing privilege and being able to change your God, I hate that this is cut off. I hate that this is cut off. This is so annoying. Okay, so I'm gonna take some calls. We've got 7 so far. Now I will say, I don't know if you guys can tell, but we're definitely gonna be editing this whole thing down. Because sis, this is we've been talking on here too much and I've been fucking up with my words and everything. So so these will be edited down. Um I'm really excited to hear your guys' true tea. I'm really, 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 really excited. So we're gonna take some calls now. We got 9 people on the line so far. So I'm gonna take a call. And side note, okay, before I take calls, please be cognizant of time. Please be aware of how long we're on the phone. I do appreciate people that want to call in and say hi and kiki and stuff, but we really need to stay on subject. Let's do this. um let's stay on the topic, okay? All right, here we go. Ooh. Also, let me know if the audio sounds bad.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi,
Hey there, who am I talking to?
I'm Allie.
Hi, Allie.
Um, so I am a trans kid, I guess. I'm 18. I transitioned when I was 12, like medically and socially. So I feel like I can give like a good perspective with this.
Oh my god, yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
Okay, I don't feel like I've ever had male privilege. I mean, like I like passed very well because I was on puberty blockers and then hormones and then surgeries and whatever. And I've always been like socialized as a female, so I don't ever think I've like had male privilege. And like I've gone through the same stuff as you have, like with like violence and also like being denied jobs and everything. So I don't feel like I've ever had male privilege, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, no, of course. I mean, so like the I think we established that I don't think privilege is the right word. I don't think
Right.
privilege to me, it's not a hard and fast thing here. But I'm curious actually from your experience, because one of the things that somebody pointed out was, you know, there is a difference between the way that young girls are socialized and even the youngest of trans people. And I'm curious if you felt that you had slightly more freedom than um, your cis peers, if that's something that you personally have felt. Because I'm not even saying that that's privilege. I'm just saying it's a difference, if that makes any sense.
Right. I feel like I can like put this in perspective because I have a twin sister who is like
Ooh.
born female, and I feel like if I like put that into perspective, I feel like I did have more freedom. I was like raised by my grandma, and I feel like she definitely gave me more freedom to do what I wanted to up until when I transitioned, while my sister didn't have that. And like
Mm-hmm.
even in elementary school, I could see like sexism like looming like when I was like very young. So like I definitely could see that, but I don't think it's like the same level as someone like who's like Caitlyn Jenner, who's like lived her whole life as like a white, cisgender man.
Mm-hmm. Or at least being seen as one. Because my thing with Caitlyn Jenner is, it's to me it's not like she just was like most of the older transitioners that I hear from are not even close to a Caitlyn Jenner experience. Like they're not people who have been like known and built an image around specifically their image as
Right.
a cis hetero male. And I think the interesting part about um somebody mentioned to me that that I'm trying to figure out ways to phrase this. Because this is a very delicate conversation and I'm trying to have it the right way.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm, it's hard to talk about Caitlyn Jenner honestly because I don't know if you guys saw all of the her homeless comments. She
Oh,
like
I saw that.
yeah, she like made a comment about how she saw these homeless people outside of her place and her neighbor moved away because she was just so disgusted by homelessness and Jesus Christ, what a terrible fucking person. But anyway, I was trying to phrase something. I'm just gonna drop it though. Um,
Okay.
so so okay, can you tell me a bit about how I'm really curious because you say you transitioned super young. Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious how you fit in school and if you had resistance or like how did that happen? Because I haven't spoken to a ton of like I've transitioned, in the because you're much younger than I am. This is a different age. I'm curious how things have been for
Right.
you. What your experience
So
was.
in Yeah. So in my high school, I was not only the only trans person, but the only out LGBT person. And like
Mm,
I experienced like my fair, can I curse? I'll just not curse, my fair share of things
yeah.
throughout high school. Like I experienced like violence, like immense transphobia and all of that. So I definitely think times have changed, but I feel like it's still, there still is transphobia, especially if you like live in an area where there's like a bunch of people who still have those ideas. Like right now I'm in college. I just finished like my first year of college and it's a lot better. Like people don't really like care what I'm doing and I'm going to like a pretty like liberal college in a liberal area.
Hmm.
So it's a lot better, but definitely like during high school, like I experienced my fair share of things. And I also feel like when you're so young, you kind of internalize all the hatred people give to you and you don't really
Yeah.
have the defenses that you could build up throughout the years. So like I guess if somebody was a trans woman who transitioned like well into their adulthood, they already have the mentality to defend themselves from people who don't like them. But for me, I personally felt like I couldn't defend myself and I internalized like everything everybody said about me.
Mm. So you did deal with a lot of stuff. And did you ever feel accepted by the other girls? Because like I think there's a really interesting conversation about like where do do the young trans girls who transition the way that you do they belong in spaces with other young girls? Because I like I said in my podcast, I don't have the best, most perfect answer for the sports question about whether or not transgender women should be playing um should be playing sports. I don't have the best answer for that, but I do
Me
think
either.
I do think a lot about the fact that I remember when I was a kid and we played soccer and it was a thing that we were doing that wasn't super, it was like a club activity. It was like just it was a thing that we were doing for fun, and it was part of participating in youth culture and with your classmates and your people in your neighborhood and stuff. It was just a way of it wasn't that deep. I'm saying that though, but I'm not a
Right.
sports person. I don't again I might be talking out my ass when it comes to this, and like
I feel
I've
like
said
I
all the
can
time.
speak to like I can't speak to sports because I never participated in that, but I can speak to like the general experience.
Yeah.
I kind of felt ostracized by most of my like community, like where I lived, but I also had that like sense of support from my closest friends and my family. So I felt like even though I was hated on like every day, I still had that love that like outweighed all the hate I received. I
Mm,
do feel like if you pass and you look like a regular girl and like you're kind of like socialized as a female, you are going to get more acceptance than somebody who transitioned after puberty, in my opinion. So I definitely
absolutely.
felt like I had the privilege of that because
Yeah.
I transitioned like right before like I would have went through puberty. I was 12, almost 13 when I went on blockers. So that definitely helped me, but I still felt ostracized from people who knew about me because I was pretty open about my transition. I've like always wanted to be an activist for the cause. So
Mm-hmm.
like I felt like if I like went stealth and like I didn't like talk about my transition or whatever, or change schools and nobody knew who I was and nobody knew about my past, I would have probably had like full acceptance because like nobody would have
Mm.
known about my past.
Yeah.
But because I was so vocal about it, that's where the hate came in.
Yeah, yeah, and that makes sense. That makes sense. That's why I've often been in like a weird, like in my own life, I've done a lot of, okay, these people in this space already know that I'm trans and they're gonna treat me not so well because of it. I need to go and find a new group of people to hang out with, who will just, accept me at face value and not treat me poorly. So I did a lot of like jumping around from like a group of people to a group of people to a group of people just so that I wasn't like dealing with being ostracized in the way that I often
Right.
was the moment people knew that I was trans. Um, because I think that's really fascinating. Like, because so in my own personal experience, like, or so I'm curious if you have this experience a bit. Because for me,
Mm-hmm.
I've never really felt. So this conversation we have online about women rejecting trans women from their spaces is one that, I don't always fully understand because in my life, um, I've always been welcomed and embraced by women, by cis women specifically. Um,
Yeah.
I've never really I haven't felt a ton of like cis women expressing that they don't want me to be around them or that they're uncomfortable with me being in their space or anything like that. But I do have this like inherent um I do respect people's space. I never want to be in a position where I feel like I've pushed myself onto a person. So my general like, you know, position is I don't ever want to, encroach on anyone's space if I'm not welcome there. And I had the experience mostly because I was rejected a lot when I was younger, of just assuming that people were not going to be welcoming to me, but then finding myself embraced in like this way that wasn't that complicated. And I wonder if in certain situations you felt that way too, where you had cis women be welcoming to you that you might not have expected would be. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I agree with exactly what you're saying. I often felt like it was like the cis straight men who gave me like most of like the shit that I
Mm.
went through, like most of the discrimination. It's because I often have this theory, it's like they were secretly attracted to me, but they didn't want to like admit to it. Maybe that's just how I cope. So like they just like outwardly like gave their transphobia, if that
Mm.
makes sense. Like the cis woman in my life, there's been like a few people who have been like kind of assholey, but like the majority of them have been pretty accepting of me and like have fought for me. I would say like most, actually, like all of my friends are either like gay men or like cis women. I don't really
Mm.
have any trans girlfriends. So I feel like that group of people has like accepted me, but like the cis straight men have been the ones who've given me the most flack.
Mm. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. It's so weird because I have the opposite experience where most of my friends are men. Like I do have like a
Okay.
core group of like cis women who are my friends, but like most of my friends are men. But that's
I
a
wish. I'm just kind of scared. I'm scared of men, if
you know
that
what?
makes sense. Like I'm scared of like straight men.
Yeah, that's valid. That's valid. That there's lots of reasons for that to be the case, you know. I don't want to be
Yeah.
a misandrist, but men are, not great. So
Can
um
I comment on the DL? Somebody was talking about the DL, like the people, the trans women who aren't out experiencing discrimination.
yeah. Oh, I'm very curious about that because I can't read the whole chat, so I don't know what people were saying.
Okay. Personally, although you're going through your own internal struggle, it's not an external struggle that people are aware of. So they're not going to give you any discrimination unless they know you're trans. So I think it's actually tone deaf and it trivializes the issues of actual trans women, not actual, but like trans women, wrong verbiage, trans women who are out about it and are visibly trans or like people know they're trans. If you equate like the struggle of like not being out to somebody who's out, because you won't go through the same violence, you won't go through the same discrimination until you become out, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that like I think that's what I'm responding to is like there's there even though and I'm comparing struggles, we're both talking about suffering under transphobia. So, it fucking sucks. But it's for either
Right.
of us. Neither of these situations are preferable. but I do think that there's a bit of a difference between um experiencing transphobia because you're an out trans person, and internalizing transphobia in a way where it prevents you from transitioning at all, or
Right.
as soon as you would like. I do think that there's a bit of a difference there, because I don't. So it's so complicated because I think ultimately if we bottom line it, okay, not coming out as trans and entering into employment, and making a lot of money, being read as a cis man. Yeah, I guess that's nice, but I think most people would want to be in your position. I think most people would want to be in
Right.
my position. So even I want to continue to acknowledge that I understand that, you know, I'm privileged in my own way. I was able to transition. It wasn't easy for me at all, but I was able to transition young, and that made a lot of aspects of my life easier in a way that an older person who hasn't come out just wouldn't be, at all. Um, you know, but I think they're different. I think what it
Yeah.
is they're different experiences and they're different struggles. I don't even know if I want to say better or worse. I think that they're different, and I think that it's worth acknowledging that. And I think that's maybe why I sometimes have the reaction I do when I have people who have lived a very large portion of their life being taken as a cis man, even though they're not. I think I have the reaction I have to that because it's such a foreign, um it's not at all part of my experience. So it does feel odd what I feel like we're equating experiences. Um but that's still a really painful place to be, and I want to continue to acknowledge that it's still a very, very painful place to be, because I know for me at least, transition was like a life or death thing, and I don't
Me
know.
too.
And if I were in it, like I said, I think I kind of had an epiphany on this broadcast. I think if I had gotten a job when I was younger, where I was being seen in one narrow way, it would be really scary for me to buck the system, because there would be a direct loss. It would be like, hey, you coming out, you're probably gonna lose your job. So when you're in that position, it's like, well,
Right.
shit, it should, I mean, I could transition and then be broke, or I could, hold off till I, have a bit of cushion financially, and then do it.
I feel so far removed from that though, because for
Hmm.
me, I like have to tell people I'm trans. So
Yeah.
like it wouldn't be like I feel like that's the total opposite of me. Like you're like cis and then like I don't know how to explain it, but like for me I always have to tell people I'm trans. So like I would
Yeah.
never have that where like I'm starting a transition like late in my life. And I
Yeah.
often feel like weird like commenting on people's lived experiences because like I've never been through that. So like it's
Yeah.
often kind of weird to me to say like, oh, you have privilege, I don't. Even if I'm saying
Yeah.
this, I feel like what me and you have been through is like better than what they're going through because they might have harder time passing or like they've met like more people in their lives that they have to tell it to and they might have a more adverse reaction to it. Like for me, I transitioned so young that like if I wanted to, I could cut off most of the people I've already met and start like a quote unquote new life and be self. But I feel like it's
Yeah.
harder to be self when you've already met so many people. So
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not going to say, although these people have that quote unquote male privilege of having so many years of being read as male, I feel like it's actually harder for them in a sense because
Definitely.
of they
Definitely.
can't go self and it's harder passing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Just the fact that I was able to change my name and my gender markers so early, and I'm not going, to my bank and to, the federal government and all these other places to undo all of that stuff. I 100% recognize that um that it's been a lot. Like, my position is the preferable one. But I think there's
Right.
an interesting conversation too about age and time, because a lot of older transitioners, when they were my age, they were, they were it was even more ignorant time. And I think that
Mhm.
the likelihood of them being able to have found themselves, and even like this comment said, they didn't even know that it was an option. They didn't even know that it was an option to transition. And so, I think this conversation is so complex and so nuanced, and
Yeah.
I'm really thankful for you for calling in and sharing sharing your true tea with me. I think I
I
want to take
appreciate it.
another call because I'm really curious if we've got somebody who's been in that position, because that's definitely who I would love to hear from. Um, but thank you so much for calling. What was your name again?
Allie,
Allie. Thank you so much for calling, Allie. And I will see you in
thank
my
you.
comment
I love your
section.
channel and keep
Oh, thank
spreading our truth and everything. I watched you for years now.
Aw. Thank you so much for supporting the channel and supporting True Tea and being my first call in. You're my first
Yes.
call in for True Tea. So thank you so much
Nice
for that.
talking with you. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. That was really, really great. I really loved that we heard from somebody who transitioned even, younger than I did. That's awesome. I'm really wanting to hear from, I want to hear from, I really want to hear from trans people who have transitioned later in life. I really want to hear from people who I don't want to, how to say this. I don't want to get into any like fights and things on this, because to me, this is all about having conversations and just learning how to relate to each other better. But I would be very curious to hear from somebody who very strongly asserts that trans women have male privilege and what they mean by that, because that was one of the biggest things that I had a hard time with this conversation. Somebody left a comment about how I have access to conversations that they did not have access to. And I found that to be so fascinating, because I don't particularly think that that's true, at least for me. It probably has been for people in the past. One person commented, they left a really, really great comment about how they're an older transitioner who had lived a large portion of their life being, seen as a cis man. And they made a comment about how they went to this job interview, and the person doing the interview very deliberately said that they don't hire gay people, not understanding that this person was a trans person, and also I believe they in the comment they said they also weren't straight. Um, and so it was very interesting, because like that I think is like an example of like a conversation that you know people who are assuming they're only speaking to men would have. Like I said in this previous comment, most of my friends are men, but I'm very acutely aware of the fact that there are certain conversations that happen between men that never happen with me there, you know? Um, so anyway, let's take another call. I've got 20 people. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, who am I speaking to?
This is Marnie. I live in Austin, Texas.
Marnie, have you called before?
I haven't. So this
You
is
haven't?
super
Okay.
cool. I love you. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know. Watch all your stuff.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah. So I guess, I wasn't able to listen to the last caller because I was listening to the cool waiting room music.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I didn't know
Yeah.
I didn't know what it's like to be in the waiting room. Is it actually
Yeah,
cool or is it not cool?
it's an experience. They got some jazzy music. It's a
Ooh.
good time. Yeah.
I
I was
like
over
that.
here dancing, also kind of nervous, but
Oh, don't be nervous. I love this because like it's to me it's a more chill format, and I get to actually talk to people and they get to actually give me their true tea. So I'm very curious what your true tea is.
yes, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to spill. But yeah, basically, I just wanted to talk about my specific experiences. I'm a trans woman. I'm 23 years old, and I transitioned about around 20. And I guess my whole idea about the, trans women with male privilege thing is like, I was always very, very outwardly feminine to the point of like from as early as I can remember. And, even after like all the years of not transitioning, I don't know, I was never like treated as a man truly. I feel like I was almost treated as this sort of subgroup. It was never super, you are a man, because I was like so obviously feminine. And I even got like, I think when I was 18, I had this contract percussion instructor job essentially for a high school. And like, I worked there for 2 years, and this is before I transitioned. And the moment, like, none of the parents saw me for 2 years. And then the moment that I actually, like, they saw me and knew who I was, I got fired like a week later.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. It's some bullshit.
And and you know that it was because of that?
I'm almost positive.
Yeah, they can't say that it's because of that, because you could sue.
Yeah, because you can't. There's always ways to work around it. But also, it's just the fact that I was like a contract person too. It isn't like I wasn't like employed by the school district or anything. But it was just like I'd been working there for multiple years, and they had asked me to like you essentially do like seasons when you're working with them, because it's like marching bands and stuff. I don't know how familiar you are with that.
Not at all. Like, I was a choir kid, so
yeah.
And theater.
Yeah, I was in theater too. But like I essentially they like asked me to come back like for the second season, quote unquote. And like I never got any like, anyone saying that I did a bad job or anything like that. It was just the moment that they saw me, and I was this weird, like very feminine pink kid who wore like androgynous clothing, and like apparently the teachers made a big, or not the teachers, the parents made a big stink, and I got fired.
Wow.
So yeah, so I say all that because I don't know, I feel like, yeah, there's certain things that I benefited from like technically, I don't know, being maybe seen by some people as a male, for a while. But I just really don't think for all of my life that I was ever, I don't know. Again, it's just like, I feel like a better way of saying it is like a subcategory.
Yeah.
You're not being treated as a man or a woman. You're sort of treated as this other, obviously not like non-binary, because, cis people, yeah, like cis people who yeah, blah, 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 blah. But it's, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because like the thing that I'm trying to like point at is like, okay, I can't say that my youth was, that of a cis girl's, because I really do think that a lot of a cis girl's experience is just like super, it's very much painted or colored rather by how by her experiencing her biology, but then also the way that she's handled in society because of her biology.
Oh, definitely.
And so there are a lot of things that just cis girls are actively discouraged from doing, because of who they are. And so, and I can't say that I felt that exactly. I felt like I felt a lot of the, what's the term? A lot of the like the little pieces of that kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? God, there's so many metaphors that are missing, but like there are aspects of like the ways that girls were treated that did apply to me, but there were so many other things that definitely didn't. And then, I can't ignore that I had a little bit more freedom when I was younger, but I can't say that I was treated the way that a cis man would be.
Mhm.
That's not true either. And so I think that like part of what the problem that I have with some of this is it sounds like so there are people who just will say outright across the board all trans women have male privilege, you know, and benefit from
Mhm.
that. And I unfortunately I make the mistake of having the chat open, and I can't read all the comments, but somebody I think is talking about being able to like take it all off and you know, go back to being your quote unquote original gender. That's not an option for me. That's not an option for most
Yeah, it's
trans
not an
people I
option for
know.
me.
You know, I talked in the podcast about how I had an experience where I was like, you know what, employment is so hard and I'm not being taken the way that I want to be. And I wish I talked more about this because this was a really fucked up, like upsetting decision for me. Because I was like, look, I've been trying to get a job, presenting myself the way that I am for the longest time. It's not working. It's not fucking
Mhm.
working. Um, so let me try to give society, I mean, let me try to do, I guess, my interpretation of like what they think I should look like, you know. Let me, you
Mhm.
know, try to sort of do that thing where I, you know, detrans myself and you know, so that I could fucking get a job. And then I went and I applied for a job and I was exclusively gendered as she and her. It didn't fucking work, you know. And I remember being
Mhm.
like, you know, it was like affirming, but it was also like disappointing because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to it wasn't going to work and I wasn't going to be able to get this job and everything. But I, you know, I'm curious if you had, given your experience with that, if you've had a similar moment where you're like, oh, let me just try to like change myself so that I could get this job.
Oh, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Like for real, for real. And I was going to bring this up, but like, you know, I think before I transitioned, I always had this, you know, obvious problem of like being very, very feminine and not being able to turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
Like ever. Like I have never been a person who's ever been able to assimilate. And then after I transitioned, you know, I also had a very similar experience to you where like nobody, you know, misgenders me, like strangers on the
Mm-hmm.
street. Like I could say, for lack of a better word, I pass.
Yeah.
But like, so now I get jobs completely fine. And I do still
Yeah.
have to feel like you know, I can't tell my coworkers around me that I'm trans because I know that they'll like automatically see me different. And so it's
Yeah.
very weird where it's like I do feel somewhat, you know, in my work now of having to sort of hide this part of myself, you know, and also just not act as, I don't know, I guess like I have an LGBT experience, you
Yeah.
know, like I have to yeah, assimilate
Yeah.
to like this woman experience. Um it's weird. It's weird.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very common thing. I know sometimes like I don't tell people I'm trans just because I just want to not. I don't want to answer questions. That's the biggest thing. It's not even that it's a secret. It's more like I don't fucking want to answer your stupid questions. Like literally that.
Exactly. That's me too. It's like yeah, I don't want to deal with all the baggage
Yeah.
that comes with it. I'd rather just
Hmm.
be treated like a person.
Yeah, and I think
Um
that's something that people don't always get is like when you come out as trans to people, like it's not just for the most part, it's not just like a oh okay, you know, reaction. It's do you still have it? Sometimes how big is it? Where do you like to put it? Who do you date? Do you tell men? Da 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 da. All this like crazy shit
yeah.
that like you nobody has like those conversations with a person that they aren't intimate with really, and it's just so awkward and yeah. I have
Yeah.
not been in a lot of
Exactly.
situations where I've had coworkers, but when I had that one job at a telemarketing place, I did, you know, my coworkers did not know. And, you know, I was able to sort of look, you know, when I was working in the call center, so it wasn't like a big thing, but still it was kind of the boss knew and that's the only person who knew and that was that. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway, Marnie, I think I want to take another call, but thank you so much for calling in. Thank you so much for giving me your true tea. You definitely added a vital aspect of the conversation. So thank you so much for calling in. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was so nice talking to you, Kat.
It was really nice talking to you too. Bye. So yeah, we've got 21 people on the line. How exciting. Yeah, it's it's really interesting to talk about like the ways that people change in order to get work. And I think one of the let's like expand this conversation. We all fucking do that. All people, trans, cis, everybody, we all sort of change ourselves for work. It's just that for trans folks, there's whether it's trying to be more cis or trying to convincingly pass as the gender that you were assigned at birth, even though you might not be very good at that. We all change ourselves for you know a job, and that's fucking capitalism for you. But let's not derail the conversation too much. Code switching, as Alexis N says, yes, that's very much the thing. I'm very frustrated by the fact that I can't read all of these comments, or the whole comment rather. I only get like the first 2 lines, which is only like the first couple of set of words. But yeah. Anyway, we're gonna take another. Oh, before we move on to this point, I just remembered we were talking about theater earlier. And I remember like my parents love randomly putting on my theater performances whenever I come home. It's genuinely very annoying. But one of the funniest things about watching old theater performances of me is watching me give on stage like my interpretation of what a man is supposed to walk and talk and act like. Because sis, let's just say it wasn't working. Let's just say that it was not working at all. Like looking at like old acting footage of me, it's like, sis. Like I mentioned, and I think I mentioned this in my podcast, but when I came out to my classmates, my high school classmates as trans, no one was surprised. And I remember thinking it was going to be like a whole fucking thing. I remember thinking it was going to be like I was going to get rejected and they were going to hate me. It was going to be this whole fucking thing, but it wasn't. Nobody was surprised. I was fooling absolutely fucking nobody. Um, and that I just think that that's so funny, and it is funny looking back, thinking that you were not being obvious about your gender when you were. Anyway, I'm gonna take another call. Actually, let me get myself another drink. How are we doing? How's the audio? Since I'm reading the comments right now, how's the audio? Is it okay? I'm using my iPhone. I absolutely hate iPhones. Hot take: iPhones fucking suck. No offense. No offense, but iPhones are the worst phone in the entire world. No offense. No offense, but I'd rather die than use an iPhone. No offense. Not to be dramatic, but if I get another iPhone, I think I might die. Okay. Oh, I sound as pretty as well. Oh, thank you, Kat. Also, hello. Okay. People were dragging me for my mic for the podcast. I'm still trying to figure out what good audio sounds like. So, I'm sorry that my mic was echoey, apparently. All right. I've got myself ginger ale, the Zevia ginger ale. All right. Somebody asked, am I keeping this stream up? No. The answer is no. So I'm still figuring out how this is going to work. This is very experimental for me. But what I'm imagining I'm going to do is I'm going to have an edited version of these calls uploaded to my podcast directory. And then what I'm going to do on top of that is probably keep these available on Patreon or something, like the unedited version of these streams. That's kind of my thought. I'm still figuring out exactly how to go. Let's go. Toya had the exact right answer. I probably will keep them up on Patreon. I think that makes sense. But yeah, let me take a sip of this. That's so good. I love Zevia. It's like, it tastes like soda, but it's not bad for you. Anyway, okay, we've got 26 people on the line. Okay, so I don't know how many of these calls I'm going to do, but I'm going to try to get through them quickly. I've been trying not to hold on to people for too long, but I'm not great at that. All right, let's go. Hello.
Oh my God, hello.
Oh my God, hello.
Okay. I'm gonna pause the video because the video is gonna mess with the audio for me.
Yes, because I hear
I've been
echoes.
struggling to hear you this entire time, which has been like so emotionally aggravating because I'm like, I want to hear all the intelligent, beautiful, amazing things that these people are saying on this damn video, but I also want to say things too from having to sacrifice by just going in the comments and talking to people.
Mm. Yeah, I haven't like I can't read the comments, but apparently y'all dragging. So
Yeah, there's certain people saying some controversial things in there, but
Oh, boy.
it's always with nuance. And what I always appreciate about you and the channel, because I'm like a neurodivergent person who's also like very spiritual, and I have a lot of Gemini energy, and you're a Virgo, and you're like one of the best Virgos out there.
Oh,
Honestly,
thank
truly.
you.
I mean, after Beyonce, but that's like Beyonce, you know. But you're still doing it, girl, and we're here for it.
Well,
But I
thank
think
you.
that, of course, I think that this whole situation of like asking, do trans women have, like, are we asking cis male privilege or just male privilege across the board, seen through the lens of like white supremacy?
Mm. I don't know, because that's the thing. So like I still need, and I'm hoping that someone will call to give me the insight. I'm still very curious at how how people who say that are defining male privilege. Because obviously, so I'll say this and say this very upfront, because some people, I got into a couple of arguments in the comments about this. I definitely believe that male privilege exists. Like I have a hard time, even like I don't know how anyone lives in this society and doesn't see the way in which men are given so much more than women. So I'm not here to deny that male privilege exists, because I think it definitely does. So, I'm curious when people say that about trans women, what exactly they mean, and what exactly they're defining that as. And also, it says people are asking me to mute my voice because I think I'm echoing still. If you could.
Let's see, how can we? Okay. It is echoing because you're on speaker, so I'll like throw the phone away. But
Okay.
I still have it close by. Can you hear me still?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. So with the whole like asking like who is this privilege going to, we also need to define like what privilege is, because a lot of people, like, even though we have these very large discussions about multiple complex issues, not everybody knows all the terminology and the definitions between the terminology. Yeah. So when we're having very like conversations like this, it's good to define the words so everybody knows exactly what is being talked about. And so when I'm thinking about privilege, I'm thinking about the definition of privilege, where like in an example of using race, me as a Black person, I face more discrimination for my skin color and for my different features of Blackness. Whereas my white trans friend, she, like, even though she is still a trans woman, and with that, there comes a level of not having the same privileges and safety that come with not passing, or as you put it in multiple videos, going stealth. She has privilege in the sense that she does not get discrimination for or any disenfranchisement or any violation of her rights because of her whiteness. And I think people seem to confuse privilege as having an added bonus, whereas privilege is just having like the antithesis, like it's having something not be thrown against you. You are having the protection and the armor of fitting into white supremacist ideals just from certain levels. And even within that, there's certain layers, multitudes of that privilege, because even though she does have that white privilege, she also is neurodivergent as well. So there's a level of ableism that she will experience throughout her life that most people that are not of the neurodivergent or disabled community would be experiencing because of their inability to fit within the narrative and the story that other people are writing for you. And if you deviate from this story, you get severe social punishment, or even for a lot of people, punishment at home through trauma and abuse and just so many different atrocious things.
Actually, so there was so one of the top comments on the video. Oh, I think they're still hearing me. Could you mute just while I'm talking, because it's gonna.
Oh,
yeah, because they can hear. It's, but one of the top comments was about how it was from a person who I never know how to say this, and people in the comments tell me, an autistic person, is that the right way to phrase it? They said in the comments that their experience with gender was very different because they were very sort of isolated in a way where they were not even put up against the expectations that most men have had. And I actually found that to be really interesting because I actually don't know. I haven't done enough research and I haven't looked into it as much as I probably should, but there's a whole conversation about how autistic people experience gender differently. And I found that to be super fascinating because I don't know what that means. And how that functions. But I found that to be like an interesting angle, and I have like things to look into. So I'm actually kind of curious how you feel about, and I actually don't know. See, I'm still learning about all of my understandings of the ways that these things work and how they are. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm actually curious to hear how you feel about male privilege experienced by somebody who is autistic. I don't know. I don't know how that functions. So if that's your situation, I'd love if you could give some perspective.
Well, I'm not autistic. I'm not on the spectrum, but I do
Okay.
have ADHD, PTSD, and I also have I have more Gemini placements. I have like 5 Gemini placements and 3 Sag placements and like a whole bunch of Aquarius placements. So it's kind of chaotic up here. But I am one of those people that has grown up being socialized as a male person, and even throughout that experience, I still hung on to a lot of my feminine traits throughout my experience. And like as I like when I was in my senior year of high school, I just remember, I don't know, it was almost as if I was waiting for the moment that hearing the word boy was going to be uncomfortable to me, but I wasn't consciously doing it. I was doing it subconsciously. And then one day it just set it off and I was like, no, don't call me that. And so I experienced a lot of my gender as like what I consider it to be like a angelic celestial experience. That's
Okay.
why I have like 3 names. And I recently found out on this really amazing Instagram site called Meme Gay. That's NEMEGAI, and it talks about like real genders and different pronouns for different people. And that's the place where I was actually able to find out that is actually an experience other people have. Like I realized that I'm also a very spiritual individual, and I believe in a lot of things that are a little bit more esoteric and of the occult. And so a lot of my experiences within that and just within the universe in general are going to be different. And I realize that there's other people out there that believe and know that they are incarnated like earth angel type people. And I'm one of those people that believes that for myself. And that is something that is called angel non-binary.
Okay. Is that your gender? I don't think you told us your gender yet.
Yeah, my gender is angel non-binary, trans femme. I'm a like feminine angel. And so I also use they, them, and say, their pronouns. And if you didn't know about they, their pronouns, they are spelled S-A-E, for like, if you were saying, oh, they, you would say they are going somewhere or something like that. And they are the second most common non-binary pronoun after they, them.
Interesting.
But I think a lot of people, yeah, it was so interesting going on these pages and learning all these different things because it's like English is such a hard language already, right? And so like a lot of times when we like commonly use a language, we're not all constantly worrying about the grammatical ways that it's being said or like whether or not we're using slang. We just like we are relaxing because it's second nature to speak this language, so we're not constantly thinking about conjugation. But when someone comes up with these pronouns that feel comfortable to them, when they typically are like neurodivergent people on the spectrum, or like they just don't have that same socialization. And because of the fact that trans people and queer people in general just take the time to discover themselves more, they take more time to learn, and they also tend to be in like mental health services and different places where they're learning about that in order to like self-diagnose and like heal themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're spending more time discovering what makes sense to them, discovering like, oh, does this feel good? What's a yes, what's a no? Because when we feel a no, when we feel that dysphoria, we absolutely know that that is an absolute no for us. And so we go out looking for places where we can find that level of giddiness because it's called like gender dysphoria and gender euphoria.
Yeah.
And when I tell you, like, I literally had a panic attack because I was like considering using she, her pronouns because I was like, I'm not a girl, I'm not a girl. Like I was saying it so loudly in my head, I have to be like, okay, bitch, we get it.
Mm-hmm.
We heard you. And then but then I thought about the fact that like so many homophobic men tend to have like, because there's that whole study about like them looking at porn and sex and stuff like that, and them getting turned on by gay male porn. And so I'm like, with that caveat of people like regularly denying things that are actually true about themselves, what if I actually am like experiencing girlhood or womanhood in a non-binary way? Because I'm not letting go of like my they themness or enviness, you know, like that's still innately a part of my experience as a being on this planet. But if I'm denying this thing so hard, maybe it's because it is something that is within me. But then I started to consider it, and I literally had a panic attack and cried myself to sleep. But then when I found the pronoun stay fair, it turned into like I literally got so fucking excited. It was like a completely opposite reaction. And I think lots of people like don't get to experience that level of excitement for things outside in the real world when they get misgendered or they're seen as genders that they actually are not because people are judging them based off the features of their body, you know? And I think that while people can be socialized in a certain way to have a mental experience because the way that habits work is like you do them for a long time, then they are reinforced by the society that you are living in, you are socialized in. And so when you transition later in life, a lot of those patterns are still innately within you, even if you have been modifying yourself over the years while in the closet to have more feminine traits until it finally came out in an expansive way. Because like the reason why I'm saying it in that way rather than just like a realization, because like from my experience, that's mostly what it is. There is a small moment that add up to this really large snowballing effect where you're just like hit in the forehead in your consciousness and like, hey bitch, you're trans. And you're like, oh, I am trans. And then like I just feel that a lot of people, like while they do get these habits from their socialization and they can carry those on, a lot of people tend to do the work to unlearn those because they don't feel that it's necessary because these habits have become a part of their identity. They've become so ingrained in their subconscious that they do that and it's ingrained in their energy, in their aura, no matter what they do. They cannot escape from themselves because they have made it a part of themselves, even if they are, in fact, a woman or a non-binary person.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of that can be very, very true. Um, I'm going to get another caller, but thank you so much for calling me. What was your name again?
My
So,
name is Sine, but on the chat, my name is Rael. And also, Kat, what are you drinking? This is true tea, and you haven't told us.
oh, I said
I'm
earlier that
drinking
I'm
some.
drinking Zevia.
Mm, love
Yeah,
that.
it's
Okay, thank you.
all right. Thank you. Bye bye. All right. So first of all, note about audio stuff. One of the reasons I was asking about my audio is because I do not have headphones, but if you do call in, um, it would be preferable if you guys used headphones just so that we could have cleaner audio up for the final podcast. People have been asking, am I going to keep this stream up? I think that I'm going to keep this on Patreon, and I'm gonna sorry, soda burp. I'm sorry, it was disgusting. I'm gonna keep this on Patreon, and then I'm going to take this and clip it and edit it down to a decent size, and that's what I think we're gonna do. So anyway, um, something that somebody mentioned, I see a so I think a lot of the conversation around Caitlyn Jenner is complicated because a lot of people want to say um like this last caller talked about an energy that is maintained, and I think that there's a lot of people who um with certain trans people, they feel uncomfortable with them because they feel like even if they have transitioned, they are maintaining a bit of, as this previous caller said, their aura from before when they transition. um and Caitlyn Jenner obviously does not represent most trans folks, but she is transgender, and that is who she is. Um, and I think that it's complex to talk. It's hard to talk about her because I think what some people are trying to communicate is that there are some tendencies that she has. There are some things that she does that feel to them as though they are not the feelings of somebody who intimately knows what being a woman in this world is, which obviously sounds very invalidating to trans people, completely invalidating to trans people. Um, but I think what they're trying to get at is there's like an aura of, a certain degree of sometimes entitlement, dismissiveness, that, a lot of times when you are raised as a man in society, it's kind of you're encouraged to sort of have those sort of um, attitudes, and having those sort of attitudes doesn't, I mean, obviously it makes you look bad in a lot of ways, but in so many ways, certain attitudes, certain ways of expressing yourself, certain ways of asserting yourself, especially when it comes to bragging and things like that, that could be seen as something that men do that, and that's part of how they reinforce their masculinity. And so I think sometimes, like, there are things that Caitlyn Jenner does that for people it makes them sort of feel like they are interacting with, as this person said, almost their old aura, um because they don't feel like they're interacting with a person who did not have certain opportunities in life because of the way that they were seen. Does that make any sense? I'm like going all over the place. um but yeah, Caitlyn do be an awful person. Briu says Caitlyn do be an awful person. I mean, some people even pointed out in the clip that I mentioned, the clip about homeless people, where she, said that her neighbor was moving. Um, you know, there was, I forget exactly what it was, but she said something along the lines of, her neighbor is packing up his hangar and moving to Sedona, Arizona, because he couldn't stand looking at all the homeless people. Um, and like and then there's like something really kind of like subtly braggadocious about that. That like we would read, somebody like a woman casually speaking about, you know, her money as very, very vain and very, very vapid, and it would look like something that was unbecoming of her to say, right? um but we don't necessarily feel that way about men who brag about their wealth. even in a subtle way. Um, you know, so it's I don't know. And then there's of course a whole other conversation to be had about, respectability when it comes to, how women are supposed to be in quotations and all that other shit. And yes, there's toxicity in there. Though I sometimes think that when people talk about um, some of their discomforts with some trans women, they're pointing at like some things that they read as entitlement that don't for them feel functionally different than the entitlement that a man would express. Does that make any sense? Am I making any sense? I don't actually know. But anyway, we're gonna take another call. Um, Here we go. Hello.
Hello.
Hi there. Who am I talking to?
You're talking to Brian. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Brian. Where are you calling from?
I am calling from New Jersey.
Oh, Jersey. Love that. I've been to New Jersey.
It's cool. I'm originally from New York, though. New York's much better.
Ah, New York is the one city I haven't like spent a lot of time in, and the couple of times I've been there, I thought it was really boring.
Oh.
But anyway, what is your true tea?
Oh, okay. So I'm nervous because I guess I'm going to be the first person to kind of get, pushed back, but in a respectful manner.
Ooh, you're pushing back. Let's push back.
Yeah. So, just some background. I am a cis, gay, black male.
Okay.
Born the same year as you. Let the people in the chat do the math. And I guess, or I feel most people who say that trans women have privilege are speaking more as a mindset than asset. So, and I think when they're speaking of mindset, they're speaking of their formative years, meaning growing up and how they were socialized. And it, so I guess I wanted to ask, my thought on it is, some people who say they were socialized as females or socialized as girls, if they were also androgynous, but they didn't have gender dysphoria, or they chose not to be trans. Like how would people take it if they also said they were socialized as girls? Like, would people take it at face value, or would your passing privilege have anything to do with if people believe you? Also, the same for someone who is trans and they say they were socialized as a girl, but they aren't passable. I feel as though people probably wouldn't believe they were socialized as girls.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
passable.
I think that like so I hold, and I will continue to hold, that when you are a young cis girl, so much of your socialization is directly tied to your biology. A lot of cis women grow up deeply resenting their bodies, and not only just that, but also the way that they're seen because of the way that their bodies are biologically. And for a lot of women, being a woman is pain, and so much of being socialized as a girl is dealing with that, and then also the burden that you're given when you're seen as in so many ways a vessel, and so I feel like I'd be curious to know what someone who isn't who was not designated female at birth would mean when they said that they were socialized as girls. Because really what I express is that I would, in so many situations, was not seen as a boy, and I was not seen as a man. And so I had a lot of the often quite confusing treatment that girls sometimes experience of course, it didn't track exactly because I'm not a cis woman, but there were certainly ways in which I was continuously minimized because people assumed that I was a cis girl. And so I wouldn't say that I was socialized as a girl. And I would be very curious if someone were to say that, what they meant, what they would mean.
Right.
Because for a lot of people who are designated female at birth, it really is them, relating to how their biology and their opinion experience has made them feel limited in this world, and navigating through that, and sometimes learning to fully embrace it, and sometimes learning not to see it as a negative thing. And I think that's such a strong part of what cis women mean when they talk about their socialization. And I think oftentimes when people talk about male socialization, they are talking about, like you said, how they were brought up, and oftentimes the freedom that young boys are given, that men in general are given, that they're not, because a lot of cis girls grow up looking at boys, especially at certain ages, because there's a short period of time where like younger girls are technically, in so many, they grow a bit faster than boys. And so there's weird times where like there's technically, we're like in certain spaces where we're like young cis girls are, for like a couple of I don't even know if it's a couple, like a year or so, they're like technically stronger than boys and can do more than boys, but are still minimized so much more because they're girls. And so I think, I don't know, I'm very curious what someone, again, would mean, someone who was designated male at birth would mean, because obviously being seen and perceived in an androgynous way, it's kind of a mixture of different experiences. You know what I mean? It's not like you're solidly seen this way or another way. I think part of the problem with this conversation, I think the general problem with this conversation, is like this. Again, we need to further define what male privilege means in this context, but also I think the problem is that we're kind of seeing this as like a this or a that sort of thing. I think that the closest we can get to
a dichotomous thought.
It's a very binary here or there. I think the closest we can get to having this binary thing is there are certain experiences that you have with your biology growing up that will drastically color your life, and in some situations your literal access to certain things. And then there are some things that are definitely based on how other people perceive you and see you. And I think that that's kind of like the complexities of a trans person, because, trans folks often have not an exact, it doesn't exactly map the way that it would with a cis person.
Right.
So yeah, those are my thoughts. Sorry for cutting you off.
Yeah. No. It's fine. I was listening to everything you were saying. Because I think of back like in grade school, when I would say, as a gay man, as a gay boy at the time, being effeminate, I would say I was socialized with the girls, but not as a girl.
Yeah.
There were, very small yet significant things. Like, for instance, I went to a private school, a uniform school, where the girls, it was very traditional, a Christian school, the girls had to wear skirts year round. And the only time they could wear pants is when it was the winter time, and they'd have to come to school with the pants on, then change into the skirt, or they have to wear pants underneath the skirt. You can imagine what that looked like if it was then their time of the month.
Yeah.
So, it's small things like that I didn't experience as a young boy, no matter how effeminate I was, or no matter, how much I shared in common with the girl. I also think about a conversation I had with a friend, and he was explaining to me, he, like myself, is a gay Black man. He grew up with sisters, and he was saying that there were certain things he was expected to do and certain things his sister were expected to do. Like maybe he had to take out the trash or clean things, but his mother was teaching his sisters how to cook.
Yeah.
And you do things like that. And I think about how many times cis women who grew up with brothers say that they were treated differently than their brothers. Their brothers could get away with a lot of things they couldn't get away with. And those are so many things kind of like in the formative years that I think matter, that I won't say all trans people ignore, but I feel some do. And one thing I've learned from you is to trust that a trans person can be an honest narrator.
Yeah.
Of their life. So say, for instance, like when trans people say that they were read as a girl, maybe not even like socialized, but people thought they were like read as a girl. I sometimes have a hard time thinking like, because you had done the video about Tiffany Pollard.
Yeah.
And Tiffany Pollard had said that she tried to accuse her transphobia by saying, well, I'm read as a trans woman, often. And you said, well, being read as something and experiences as something are two different things. And I don't want to like tell trans people like sometimes them being read as something was like the one-off chance, like the person in the supermarket read you as a girl, or the person in the post office read you as a girl, but how are you socialized by your classmates, by your parents, I would think that's more important, but I don't know. So can you say as a trans woman?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really complex because, I've been in several so I think I've told this story before, but I've been in several weird, funky situations where when people have known me for a while, they will digest me one way versus when people just meet me and don't know much about me. So, for example, I'll never forget. I had this time where my glasses broke and we went to the optometrist to get my glasses repaired. And I think I was probably like 19 or so at this point. So I'd already been like starting my transition and, visibly changing, but I don't think my parents really saw it, or at least when they saw it, they didn't really process it for what it was. And the guy who was fixing my glasses, I remember because I was actually back home I was home from break, and he just like started having this really organic conversation with me about whether or not I was gonna give my parents grandchildren. And he wasn't speaking to me like I was a young I was a young man. He was speaking to me like I was a cis woman. And it was just an awkward conversation because my mom did not understand that this person was reading me as a cis woman, which was common for me, and I knew that was my experience. But my parents, especially because I had hid my transition from them for years, did not understand that was how I was being digested at all. And I had so many like experiences like that, where I'm out and about with my parents and people, read me. I mean, this is obviously different for me now, but like I'm talking about like way back when, people were reading me as a girl and they were correcting them, and saying, oh, no, 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 And so I think it's such a different thing because like, for me, I now as an adult understand that there were a lot of really weird experiences that I had when I was younger because I didn't understand that I was being read as a girl. I didn't understand that there were certain people who didn't have the best intentions because they were reading me as a girl and treating me in a way um, that was really creepy and predatory in so many situations. And I didn't have those conversations with my parents about safety, or not going certain places, or not walking at certain places, not going places alone and stuff like that. I didn't have those conversations because that was not what was hoisted onto me. And
Right.
to kind of like reference your stuff about brothers and sisters and the different ways that they're brought up, and trans people not always acknowledging that. I think so. It was interesting because I think in some of the conversations I had in the comment section, I noticed a little bit of that because, I think that when you haven't like really how to say this. So, you know, in the communion with women that I've been having, really, especially out here, especially in a sex positive context, and learning, you know, more about the cis women that you know, friends that I have, it's, you know, I've learned just so much intimate shit that like I didn't like really know, you know, about before then. And I think that there's just some stuff that like, you know, trans people don't always see in terms of the way that specifically cis women are treated, or how they internalize a lot of their own experiences. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think it's easy to not always understand the like very deep, insidious, like ways in which being female in this society fucking sucks for a lot of women. And so I think that it's easy to not always get that, like, yeah, like you said, when a lot of young girls are young, boys are, you know, told you go outside and you play, and girls are said, no, you have to stay inside and cook,
Play
you
with your
know?
easy bake oven, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you have to, you know, learn how to bring up kids because that's your purpose. That's
Right.
your what you're supposed to do. And I think, you know, the vast majority of trans women have never been in that position because that was not what was expected of them. And I know that for some
Mm-hmm.
cis women, their discomfort with trans women, and I've said this before, is that they embrace the bonds that for in their experience limit them. You know, it's hard for a lot of cis women to watch trans women so easily, in their opinion, um, embrace femininity, um, you know, in a way that
In a very
they,
particular way.
in a very particular way, in a way that often reflects a very shallow understanding of being a woman. I mean, one of the things that, like, I remember when Caitlyn Jenner was asked, like, what's the hardest thing about being a woman? She said, putting on, you know, figuring out what to wear that day. And that's like such a like it's such a
And
shallow, almost fetishistic, but I wouldn't say in like a sexual way. It's like a very I don't know. It's like a very shallow understanding of what being a woman is. And I think that there are some people who get kind of offended because they don't get that, like, there are so many nuances to the ways that women exist in this society. And it's not about looking pretty and being cute, or you know, or being sexy. And they see
mm-hmm.
trans women reach for that. And that's what often feels offensive to them. Um, so yeah, I think that that's I think that's part of it. And so I think that you've got something there where I don't always think that um all trans women sort of fully, so like I try, even though I know I probably shouldn't, I do try to listen to gender critical folks a bit, because I do think that like there's something that they're talking about that is super valid. Their biology, you know, cis women's biology you know, has been the source of strife for them for you know, ever, essentially, especially legally in this country. We still fucking debate
Mm-hmm.
what women can do with their own fucking bodies. Um,
Right.
you know, so, and I can see how I can see how um how a cis person could see trans people functioning and be like, what the fuck, this doesn't relate to me at all, and it's kind of offensive that you would describe me in this way, or that you would call this person a woman, because they have no clue what they have no clue what we've gone through. They don't intimately know. So, you know, I think there's something there. Obviously, I don't agree, but I'm not. What I'm basically, what I'm trying to say is, and kind of you know, understanding where you're coming from, is that, you know, there's sometimes there. I think you're right, where there are trans people who don't acknowledge, or don't want to acknowledge, um, you know, the difference. You know, because like one of the things that I ran into in the comment section was a lot of people were conflating their experience as a feminine young man to being raised as a woman, um,
Mm-hmm.
um, and dealing with the shit biologically that definitely fucking um, impacts the way that you navigate through the world. And you know, these experiences just, they're not alike. you know.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and it's
I
I
think
don't.
a lot of that goes into um uh which a lot of people in the comment section might not agree with me either, because I find people get pushback on this. Um, some trans people and some trans women and some gay men don't want to acknowledge that they can be misogynistic.
Oh yeah, that
And I think,
definitely,
yeah,
definitely.
and even myself at times it's something I'm having to unlearn. Like, well, why do I think this?
Mm-hmm.
When I had finally moved out, my first living situation was with roommates. I wanted to get my hair braided and I didn't know how to blow my hair out.
Mm-hmm.
And the female roommate was telling me, well, you can, or the cis woman roommate, sorry,
Yeah.
was telling me, well, blow it out like this and do this and that. And I was kind of looking at her like, you're not going to do it for me. And it's something so silly, but I
Mm-hmm.
really thought like she was supposed to do it for me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's my misogyny, and those are things I have to kind of like, unlearn.
Mm-hmm.
I did also want to tap into what you had mentioned about like masculine ideals, I guess, versus male privilege
Mm-hmm.
in the workplace, because that's something that I've actually dealt with. Not being the most masculine man, being kind of shut out of certain opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And but at the same time, and this is speaking from the standpoint of being a gay Black male, there are certain opportunities I've been granted over cis Black men because of my femininity, because I'm not seen as the quintessential scary Black guy.
Yeah, that's a whole conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you would call that, because I don't want to say I don't have male privilege, but yeah.
There's something there though. There's something there. I mean, that's a whole other conversation that we definitely don't have time for. But I definitely have noticed that like there are certain situations where they will pick a Black person, but only somebody who could not be scary, and of course a feminine Black man could
Non-threatening.
not be scary. You know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think we're gonna go on to the next caller. But thank you so much for giving your perspective. I really loved your brew. You had a lot of really interesting things to say. So thank you for adding to the conversation. What was your name again?
Thank you, Kat. Brian.
Brian, thank you so much for calling in.
Thank you. And
Bye.
thanks for the people in the comments that showed love.
All right, bye. So on the point about misogyny, I wanted to really quickly touch this. I think I don't know how you live in this society and not ingest misogyny, everyone, I believe, can exert misogyny. Um, everyone, I believe, can weaponize misogyny. Hatred of women is just, it's part of this society. It's part of living in a patriarchal society. Um, so I definitely, I think everybody does, and I think that that's one of the interesting layers of this that's relevant to this conversation is, um, I don't think that. So when I did the video a little while back about Sasha Shah, and I talked about her being misogynistic because she was, um, there were a lot of people commenting some pretty transphobic shit because they wanted to essentially make the argument that Sasha was still a man and was still definitely tapping into some misogyny that she held from um what they're assuming her previous life was. And I'm not going to say that that might not be the case, but what I will say is I think it's interesting how when trans women exert misogyny, it's seen as worse than misogyny that like literally anyone else experiences. Because what's crazy to me is like I obviously don't agree with what Sasha says, but I've definitely heard cis women say the same exact shit to other cis women. Um, I've I've seen it. I've heard it. I've listened. I've heard so many conversations about you don't please your man. You don't do this and that for your man. If you did this, this and that, you know, like you would be able to keep a man. Like it's yeah, but I just think it's interesting because everyone, in my opinion, can definitely exert misogyny, but you know, I think it's often seen as, you know, more. I think that we all have to unlearn misogyny, and I think that, you know, trans women often have to do that as well. I don't know if a trans woman unlearning misogyny is necessarily heavier than anyone else unlearning misogyny, but that's just the way that I feel. Anyway, we've got 35 people on the line. Holy fucking shit. We've been here for over 2 hours. Oof. Oof. Okay. I know I don't want to be on here too much longer, but I've had a lot of really great comments. I still haven't, I don't think, gotten an older transitioner who called in. So let's I'm gonna see. I'm crossing my fingers for one of the next callers to be that, because I would love to talk to somebody who's in that position. So here we go. Next caller. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, who am I speaking to?
I got picked.
You got through.
Hi, Kat. Wow. I'm a big fan.
Oh, thank you.
If you didn't know. My name is Jay. I actually took it as a good sign when I saw the 281 area code, because I'm from Houston. So I was like, I'm going to call it. So
that's just a random number they gave me too.
That's too funny. But yeah, I just wanted to start by saying I'm really grateful that I just discovered you. Okay, well, I think D'Angelo Wallace is actually why I discovered you.
Oh, I love D'Angelo Wallace.
Yes, and I've been so grateful to him for recommending you, because and it's become really personal for me lately. I realized I didn't have much understanding about trans experience, especially for trans Black women. And as a Black woman myself, I've been really trying to figure out how I could be more educated and be a better advocate in that space once I learned, you know, the challenges that are faced within our community for trans Black women. And
well, I
so
appreciate you
want to
for.
thank you.
Oh, go on.
I just wanted to thank you so much for your bravery, honestly, in a lot of your content. I mean, I was attracted to your talk about this, about kink, because I'm in that space and I'm polyamorous. So I appreciate everything about what you're putting up there, and in a very educational way and safe way. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for following me. I really appreciate when I see Black cis folk in my my section. It makes me really happy. So thank you for listening and having an open mind and open heart. I'm curious what your true tea is on this particular conversation. I'm very, very curious.
Well, something very recent has made more of a personal conversation. I guess I wanted to ask you feedback from the perspective of, like, I guess what you would have liked for support from people close to you when you were transitioning or when you were deciding how to come out. I had one of my the longest person I ever dated came out to me recently as trans. And I thought it was very interesting, your topic today, because they formerly, you know, they were AMAB, assigned male at birth, and a white male. So it's been very interesting. That's something that's come out in the last week or so. And after we ended our relationship, we're still close. We're actually, I consider her my best friend, really. And even with how messy everything went, just breaking up. And I've been wondering how to be supportive, because it's huge. And if there is any feedback, I'd appreciate it.
So it's so funny because I don't know if you've gotten to this part of my videos yet, but I've had several people that I've dated come out to me as trans. And I don't, I mean, I never really know how to react to it because oftentimes they've been coming to me for like advice. And it's actually, I think one of the dots that I connected um with this person that recently came out to me was that I have a really hard time um it's kind of, I mean, and this has nothing to really do with them, it's all me, but i I feel pretty uncomfortable when like people that I was like very very attracted to, who sometimes I've had sex with, come out to me as trans women, because it just makes me feel so many like weird feelings. And I always want to be
Thank you for naming that.
huh
Thank you for naming. Thank you for naming that.
yeah.
Because I felt bad about my weird feelings.
Mhm.
Even as a queer woman, it's it still sparked weird feelings. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so complicated because, like, obviously, from my situation where I am, advocating for people and educating for people, I should have probably a different reaction. But it's just very hard for me. And I think for me, I'm recognizing, all right, that has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do um, with me and my own discomforts. um but this is still a very real feeling. And so, when I've been in those situations, I mean, I'm not the proudest to say that I don't usually stick around to support people because, I mean, first of all, I just have a general problem with that. That's a role. I talk about that in my podcast, but like, I have a general issue with my friends and things where they are the most present when they need my help. And when I'm in the bad situation, they are not very present. So I don't always love when the way that people factor me into their life is um, support. um, but
Mm.
I guess for me, because I've never been in the situation of like coming out to somebody, so I might not even have the best advice for this. But um, I don't know. I guess when it comes to people supporting me in general, like, I think I would have liked to have felt, um, hmm, so I'm so weird because like when I was so when I started recognizing my gender more and more, I actually distanced myself pretty severely from my friends, like my best friends when I was in high school, which was not great. Because I've always just kind of been a lone wolf in that way where I'm like, let me just like figure my shit out alone in a corner and come back when I've got like my shit figured out. Because like I didn't really have that support, but I think I didn't turn to them because I felt like they were gonna like challenge me, or um maybe question my own understanding of myself. And so
Mm.
I kind of even hated the possibility of that. So I think I avoided certain conversations for that reason. I think when somebody comes out, it's like they're in a very vulnerable space and they want to feel um like they have a person that they can talk to, that they could actually, that will fully validate them, um and fully accept them. But everyone's so different. Like stuff that would be good for me is probably not good for other people. Like I hated when people put extra focus on my transness when I first came out. I hated that so much. I also hated
Mm.
when cis women would try to teach me to be feminine because I thought that I didn't know how. Or they wanted to sort of like teach me to do certain like walk. I remember when I was coming out in college, because I when I was in college is when I recognized I was a binary person. The thing that everybody wanted to do was teach me how to walk in heels, and I was like, I like Doc Martens, like that's heels are fun, I guess, but that's not how I personally see femininity, as
Yeah.
high heels and all that. So, it was kind of like, oh, like I just hated that sort of stuff. But like it was so weird because looking back, like those were people that were definitely trying to be supportive, you know, and sometimes them being supportive, at least for me, wasn't even like what I wanted. I just kind of wanted to be like treated normally not hyper focused. But everyone's different, and so this person might be in a I'm figuring out my shit and I just need to figure out my shit sort of person. So I think my advice for everybody whenever they're dealing with somebody who's just recently come out is sort of like let them lead it. If you're wanting to be supportive, like let them lead the conversation and just know that you're there, that let them know that you're there to support them, and that you are a solid person that they could lean on and things like that. um but yeah, let them lead the way that they let like actually it might even be helpful to like literally ask them how you could be supportive. I don't know if you've asked
Right.
if you've asked her deliberately, like, hey, I want to be supportive, what do you need from me? Because I don't even think that people even know until they feel unsupported what they need for support, so
Right. And I can kind of overcomplicate things as I do also as a fellow Virgo. So yes, I will start with asking straight out. But she did let me know that what really helped her kind of cross the other side in a way was me asking her what she preferred for pronouns. I think she was still leaning more towards non-binary, and then when I asked her, she said she has to really take time to think about it. So that was kind of cool to know. But thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing about the whole teach. Like, I will never teach any woman how to be a woman. I've not really been able to do even as a cis woman. I feel you on the Doc Martens. At least I think heels are only great when you're on your back.
Yeah,
So,
honestly, they look great, but like I know it's so funny. I buy them, but then like I wear them and then I hate it. I'm like, why did I do this? This is terrible. This is just torturing myself. Also, I'm really tall. None of this makes sense.
Yeah. So thank you so much for the advice.
Yeah, no problem. I think I'm gonna take another caller, but thank you so much for calling in and getting insight. Hopefully things will go well with you and your now best friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much, Kat.
All right, bye-bye.
This is the name I did. Bye-bye.
All right, so we've got 30 people on the line. And so I know that I'm probably not going to be here for much longer because this is 2 hours. This is 2 hours. How long is the final going to be of this? We're going to see. But I definitely want for people to call in specifically about the topic at hand. And like I said, I'm really wanting to hear from people who are the people who I was talking about in the video. People who transition later in life. I really would love to hear from those people. So, if you're one of those people, feel free to call in. I'm going to take the next caller. So don't feel bad if you're one of those people who if you're not one of those people when I answer this call, but I would definitely like to hear mostly from those people because we haven't talked about that yet, and I would really love to have that conversation. So anywho, I'm gonna answer the next call. Here we go. Hello.
Hello, this is Audrey.
Hi, Audrey.
Oh, you sound really, really different over the phone than you do online.
Oh, do I really? It's probably, you know what it is? It's probably phone voice.
You do.
It's probably like, I think every single time I answer the phone, I answer it in like a different voice. But also,
it's amazing how different it sounds, though.
It's a different mic.
Anyway, I'm from Philadelphia. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say it's a different mic, and also like I use like a processor thing on my like video mic and stuff, and yeah, it's a whole thing.
Oh, that makes a lot more sense. So I'm from Philadelphia, and I'm actually the Audrey that left the comment you read earlier in the stream.
Oh, great! Oh my God, I'm so glad you called. That's perfect. Did you delete that comment or was it nuked?
I guess it was nuked. I haven't touched it.
Oh shit! Because like when I looked at my comments later, it wasn't there. But I'm glad that I screenshot it because I thought it was a really, really great comment. So I'm super glad that you called. That's perfect.
Thank you. I was really excited when you read that comment. To be honest,
it was a great comment.
I did not expect to have it read aloud, especially not on the stream.
So. Aw, well, hopefully it was too weird for you. But yeah, I thought it was a really good comment, and it was like I saw it like a couple of hours ago, like right when you left it, and I was like, oh, this is such a great one. We have to talk about this. So, yeah. But,
yeah, well, the reason I called in is actually to expand on what I had said in that comment. I think the place where I want to start with that is that there's different varying like kinds of privilege in that respect. And like you had mentioned this a little bit in your last podcast, but or that Caitlyn Jenner is a celebrity, and as a result, her extreme wealth and her extreme celebrity give her certain privileges that many trans women who transition later in life do not have. And I know quite a few of those people. I'm fairly privileged myself, so I don't mean to say that, like as an example, I have a 6-figure salary because for the majority of my life, I've been read as a man. And so I don't want to discount that I have that. But really what I wanted to focus on are the kinds of experiences I had up until the point where I transitioned and how really those experiences really don't fit the model of being a man, but they don't really fit the model of being a woman either. I think it was Brian who called earlier. He had said something along the lines of being an effeminate man, he would be passed over for various opportunities that the more heterosexual presenting men didn't get passed over for. And that was something that I had experienced. The other thing that I experienced was being routinely disrespected for the opinions I did assert. And often that kind of being ignored, being spoken over aspect that many women do experience. And then I think something that might be very specific to trans women is especially trans women who their egg hasn't cracked and they're attracted to women. A lot of times when I would bring up my relationships and what was going on with them, other men wouldn't believe what it was that I was saying. And the reason why is because when a man is in a relationship with a woman, very often what they'll experience is that urge to have sex and all of the processes that come along with that. And it's kind of expected that you demonstrate that. The way that you talk about it, especially in conversations that are only amongst men. And so I would say something along the lines of, oh no, we literally slept overnight. We slept together overnight and that was it. That was all that happened. And they'd be like, no, that's not what happened. You had sex with her, you know? And this wasn't something that happened once. It happened routinely throughout my college experience. So that's just an example of some of the things I faced that they weren't male experiences and they weren't women's experiences. There was something in between, but it does have this character of being something that I imagine that you didn't experience since you've been read as a woman for as long as you have.
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting because like as we're talking about this, I'm thinking of people who this is probably gonna go down the wrong path. I don't know how we're gonna handle this, but we're gonna say it. People who are in my colleagues of mine who were let's look back up. So an issue that I've often had with my platform is for the longest I've been on here, I have been a trans woman, and it has been kind of frustrating to consistently be invalidated because of that. And people not listen to me because of that. And that's very, very frustrating. And I have colleagues of mine who did not start their platforms as trans women or being seen or presenting themselves to the world as trans women who were able to be seen with more legitimacy at first than I ever was. And obviously, like we've discussed, I don't believe that being seen as the wrong gender is privilege, because that's not privilege. That's not how you define it at all. It does stick to me though that even in like in for just because I know only my experience, I know my own sort of thing, and I've felt, like I've said, consistent invalidation of my voice and what I've wanted and who I was and how I wanted to, express myself, and then just misframing of it all and everything. And that's very, very frustrating. Um, and of course, when the people that I'm vaguely referencing came out as trans, they were not met with, fanfare. And there were definitely people who stopped supporting them because of that. Um, but I've always faced this world as a trans woman. Well, for the most of my life, I've faced this world as a trans woman. And so it's been hard to kind of like see that our experience, like to say or suggest that like our experiences are not very much different because of that difference of just being able to be seen. Because even, because we talked about this, like, I think that even a feminine man is still being seen with more validity than a cis woman. So in a lot of scenarios, most scenarios, and so that's like,
I'm not entirely certain that that's true, but I also don't have much experience seeing effeminate men in these kinds of situations. So I try to stay away from that particular position, mainly because I don't have the experience of it. But I mean, not but, I don't want to say but. I believe that the experiences you have are valid, and the kind of thing about it is I see our situations as being incredibly different as well.
Yeah.
The thing that I object to is specifically you talking about Caitlyn Jenner, who has a significantly different degree of privilege than the rest of us do, and then transitioning from there into a discussion about us, simply because she transitioned later in life. And again, most trans women who transition later in life, they don't have that experience. I'm part of a support group that has somewhere between 15 to 20 different trans women in it, almost all of whom transitioned much later in life, like 10 to 20 years later than I have. And they all have experiences that are very similar to mine. And in addition to that, I'm kind of one of those supportive people, and I'm still early enough in my transition that I haven't, or in my trans experience, that I haven't really experienced, like, quote unquote, too much of that supportive role yet. And as a result, like, I tend to be the person who steps in and I hear all of their stories, and I'm not trying to equate them to yours or really anyone else's. What I'm trying to do, though, is just say that those experiences should not be equated to Caitlyn Jenner's just because they happen to transition at a point in their life similar to hers.
Yeah,
or
well,
because
I
they
think
feel like they can't come out, which is a deeply personal thing to try to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, at the top of this show, I did say that I think it, it's not fair to compare Caitlyn Jenner to every older transitioner, because it's not the same scenario at all. What I lean on when it comes to the comparison is that Caitlyn Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner is rich and privileged and all these other things. These are all true. I don't think she would be in that position had she not been able to leverage herself in this world at some point in her life as a man. Specifically because Caitlyn
absolutely.
Jenner was,
and
like,
I agree that works the same way with the way that I've managed to benefit from effectively pretending to be a man.
Which is what it is, and some people can pretend better than others, and
right.
And that's, I think that's kind of like, going back to the parallel I made with bi erasure and so-called straight passing privilege. It's like, it's not really a privilege. That's not the right word. But I've never in my life been able to be seen or digested as, a man in a way that would at all have benefited me or given me wealth or given me access. That just hasn't been the case for me. And so obviously I know that not all older trans folks, or later transitioning trans folks are Caitlyn Jenner, because that's definitely not the case. Like, because for context, and I tried to point this out earlier in this conversation. We're talking about this, but I would say that a lot of the older trans people that I've known who transitioned later in life have unfortunately had to live very painful, deeply painful lives, where they have been, um, you know, they're now in a position where they feel like they've wasted most of their life, and you can't. That's a really painful position to be in, where it's like, fuck, I've just spent the past, 40 years being somebody that I'm not, and now I just have to live the rest of my life with that in mind, but also trying to, be as happy as I can for the rest of the time that I have. And that's a situation that I will never be in, because I transitioned as young as I did. um and so I definitely don't want to communicate or make it seem like, you know being closeted for a very long time, and then building relationships, marriages. I think you mentioned marriage in your post, and all these other things. Like, I would never have wanted to, be in a situation where I literally lose, you know all of my family. Like, I like the older transitioners that I've known, they've often had kids and an ex-wife and all these other things, and they hold off their coming out for a lot of reasons. But I know I've known a lot of older trans people hold off because they want to, make sure that their kids are, out of college, or in college, and doing well, and all this other stuff. They've got all these things to consider before they
Hmm.
transition, and that's not like an easy decision to make by any fucking means. um I guess it's just I'm still stuck on me never being able to be in a position where I could save money to, you know, pr- pursue any, like, right now, if I needed to right now have, any of the various surgeries I wanted to have, at the very beginning of my trans life, that I don't want to have anymore. But if I could do that, if I needed to do that, I could do that now. I could not do that, um, you know, 20 years ago. Um, well, not 20 years ago, because I was 10. Couldn't
Right.
do that, 15 years ago, let's just say, because it just wasn't at all an option for me. And I'm sure you've known people who are even able to save up, just they have that goal where they're like, okay, I'm going to keep working here, and I'm going to save money, and I'm going to, you know, maybe even have some procedures that are very subtle, that like aren't obvious. And then I'm gonna get to a certain point. Oh shit. Who called me? Hello. One second. Hello? I gotta
Sure.
call my other phone. Oh my god. Oh, um, 1 second. I'll be right back. I'm really sorry. I have a really important phone call that I just got. I'll be right back. Hi, what's up?
I have control of the stream. Ah ha ha ha. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah. Oh, great. Okay. Okay, so I actually don't have insurance, but I'm willing to pay for it. Is that okay? I don't have either of those. Okay. Okay, thank you so much. Oh my god, that's such an ironic phone call for me to get right now, because I actually I vaguely talked about this on my Patreon, but I actually am having surgery next couple weekends, like a week and a half from now. And I just got a call from my pharmacist about like medications I need for said surgery. So that was such a interesting time to get that call. But anyway, where were we? I totally lost the point. Bring us back. Sorry
Well,
about that.
I think I can build off of both of those things just a little bit.
Oh yeah,
And
please
that
do.
is that a lot of people, myself included, we don't have the money to transition yet either.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, even though I was trying to build a family and things like that, for various reasons, my ex and I couldn't have kids, and so we were considering adopting. And so we were saving money up for that, and we just met our goal when it suddenly became the case that, I came out and there was a lot of unresolved things between the two of us that ultimately resulted in our separation. And of course, we're still great friends because why wouldn't
that's
we
good.
be?
That is good.
Yeah, but the thing is, the reason I have the money to transition now is solely because I was saving up the money to adopt a child, and it was kind of just sitting there. I'm one of the older millennial people, and like, even though I have this really nice job, the position of money that I've been lucky enough to be able to fully support myself, since I graduated college, and have a lot of these great opportunities. But it hasn't been enough to own a house. It hasn't been enough really for me to even consider getting any of these kinds of surgeries. And if it hadn't have been for the case that I had switched jobs specifically so that we could earn the money for that, I wouldn't be in a position where I'd have the money to transition either, just because it's so difficult for us to live as millennials these days.
Yeah, I mean, so really what go on.
So I guess really what I'm trying to get at is that, like, I mean, if you're a person who is 10 to 20 to 30 years older than I am, the kind of criticism that applies to Caitlyn Jenner might even apply to them, or the ones of, well, they have the ability to do this because they have the nest egg and they have, they have that kind of buffer set up that they can option to use for that, But that again, the younger you get, especially for people who are 5 to 10 years younger than me, if not more, those options start drying up really quickly, just because, the way that the economy's been doesn't really exist. So it's very sensitive, I think, to the particular age that you did, the particular
definitely.
age that you're talking about. And in addition to that, And in addition to that, it's one of those things where it's important to distinguish that there are varying categories here.
Yeah.
And really that's kind of like the main thing that I'm trying to get at. It's like there's so much variety here.
Yeah. There's a lot
that you really have to be kind of like slicing a very small portion of the population to be saying anything specific.
Yeah, which is like part of what I was kind of saying, where it's like, I don't think there's like painting it with a broad brush is not probably the most productive thing to do, because I don't think that's everything, all these things are true always at all times. I think when it comes to like the saving money part, because I definitely hear what you mean about one of my first conversations with a later transitioner, they had this whole argument with me about how when they were my age, they had this, they had that. And I was like, okay, but you're like 60 and things were very different. Back then, things are, if I want to be a homeowner, I have to leave the state. That's kind of where it's at. It's like, times were very, very, very different. So from my experience, and I just had this thought as you were talking about this, like when you're a young trans person, you're also put into situations that you probably aren't. I mean, not that it's impossible, but you aren't going to be put into when you're an older trans person coming out, because, like, so for example, for me, I used to say this all the time on YouTube because it was so true back when I was vlogging about this, but my situation when I came out young was like, people were more willing to pay me $400 to suck their dick than they were for me to flip burgers for 2 weeks. I was put into so many situations where, sex work was sort of what was hoisted onto me because I was young and I was trans. I did do sex work for a little while. And it was definitely like a really demeaning, upsetting experience for me. And I think there are definitely probably people who transition later in life who could tap into a similar experience. But, I know so many younger girls when they come out and they have a hard time getting a job and they have a hard time securing employment, they end up doing survival sex work because that's like the only way that they reasonably can save large portions of money. Um, and so I definitely hear what you're saying with like generational stuff and stuff. I think that my thoughts around it are um I think saving money for just the idea at all, even saving money for something other than surgery, is such a far gone, like it's such a distant wish for a lot of younger trans folks, because I mean, I'm saying this, and I tried to point this out earlier. I'm saying this, and maybe my own expressions here are out of date because I'm positive that things are a lot better for younger trans people now. Positive, because I'm talking about my youth, in like the early 2000s. So take it with a grain of salt, because things are different now. But shit, it was it was really fucking rough, and it was really fucking rough because um I could not get a job at like any other quote unquote normal regular place. So I don't know. I think that there are so many variables, and I think you're right to point out that it's not, you can't really paint it all with the broad brush. And I definitely, like I said, I know that Caitlyn Jenner does not represent most or a late in life transitioners like at all whatsoever. She's just very loud. That's just really, she's very loud. And you know Caitlyn Jenner is one of those people who I'm like, I know that it sounds invalidating, but I wish you would just take a couple of years and like be quiet for a bit and like, live in
Just
it for
listen.
a bit instead of, talking. Because I think what
Mm-hmm.
bothers me about her specifically is, she's speaking as though she is the ambassador for trans people. And like, so somebody left a comment that I thought was really interesting. They said that their problem with Caitlyn Jenner was that she presents her accomplishments in life as though they were accomplishments that she achieved as a trans woman. um and of course, saying that, obviously someone who isn't just because somebody hasn't started physically transitioning doesn't mean that they aren't a trans woman. That's I think what they were saying was like, these are all accomplishments that probably would not have happened if you were out as a trans person. um
Exactly. And her statements to that effect are really kind of demeaning, and I
Mhm.
interpret them at least that way, where it's demeaning to me when she says that, because
Mm.
just the experiences I've had since coming out, they're drastically different.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Even like, with everything I've said, they're so different from what they were that, yeah, it's at the very least it's insensitive for her to think that she's able to speak for, I don't know, any of us, in my opinion. But
Yeah, she can speak for herself. But unfortunately, I
yeah,
mean, that's what
exactly.
sucks.
And that's
Like,
something that, like, when you're in trans spaces, that's what people say too. It's like, it's just naturally saying, it's like, you're going to speak your truth. I'm going to speak my truth.
yeah.
And that's what we're going to talk about, because everything is so like fractured.
Yeah,
Um,
it's not all the same. Everyone's got so many different experiences. That's why I really don't like when people boil down trans experiences as universal. And it's actually been very frustrating for me, um, because I even we've had this whole conversation about privilege. I've always said that I am an incredibly privileged trans person, and that's just the way that I feel, because I look at how other trans folks survive in this world, and I've been through some fucking shit, but you know, my life has not been as hard as many other people's lives, and it's hard for me not to even acknowledge my own privilege here, because I certainly have it. And I would say that I probably am significantly more privileged, even if I wasn't able to, you know, gain wealth, um, in the ways that people who didn't come out were able to gain wealth. I still have a lot of privilege, and it always feels it always feels really, really odd for me to like not acknowledge that. So I kind of feel bad when people, even just listening to me, think that my experience represents everyone. So it is kind of hard for me to like to know that there are people who are looking at Caitlyn Jenner and thinking that she represents really anyone other than herself. Because even the most conservative trans women who I know who transitioned later in life are not like Caitlyn Jenner. And I don't think that they even hold Caitlyn Jenner as an icon in their life, you know? Like it's no, I don't think anybody
Yeah, I
does.
don't know anyone who does.
Yeah, that's but
I really would love to continue this conversation, but unfortunately I do have to go. And
okay.
I'm sure that there's other people on the line who would definitely love to hear, who would definitely to speak to you too. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, and I love what you do. Definitely keep doing it.
Thank you.
And thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Yeah,
Bye, Kat.
I'm so happy you called. So thank you so much for giving me your true tea. Bye.
You're so welcome. Bye.
Oh, I manifested that. I manifested that. I'm so happy that she called. That's literally what I wanted. I feel very, very happy about that. That was literally like, oof, that was just so perfect. Um, I am going to take a couple more calls, but I will say that I need to run. We've been here for 3 hours. Oof. Fortunately though, listening to these, I already know like which calls I'm probably gonna pick and edit in and all that stuff. So I think that this won't be too hard to edit. But I'm gonna take a couple more. I'll take 2 more. And then I'm probably gonna have to run. So all right, let's do it. Hello.
Hi.
Hi there. Who am I speaking to?
This is Matthew.
Oh,
Hi.
hi,
Oh my gosh,
Matthew.
sorry. There's like a delay between the video that I was just watching and the call. Anyway, yeah, I don't want to like waste your time, so I'll kind of cut to the chase if that's cool.
Do it.
So I am a cis gay man, and I feel like I never, like, I don't want to say I don't have male privilege because I obviously do, but I feel like even before I knew I was gay, I was never part of that like boys club. I never felt like I guess reaped the full like benefits of like quote unquote like male socialization. And so I don't know, like I remember I was talking to like my professor, or whatever, and he was like, "Yeah, don't minimize yourself." And I was like, "Shoot, I've been doing that." And this sort of, I guess, traits, I guess, of female socialization that I've picked up from basically being surrounded by women my whole life and kind of being excluded from that like boys club. And I was just wondering if there were any like what you had to say about that, any like questions, comments. I don't know. Just that's my true tea.
Well, I think so whenever because this is like a repeated theme of like being gay or feminine or just maybe very eggy, and people can kind of read it but don't know what it is. People being excluded from the so-called boys club. I guess for me, when I look at that, when I hear this stuff, I think a lot about like, okay, um that's true. And I'm definitely not going to doubt that because I've seen that. But I also think about like, okay, what about lesbian women, who would never, who are also used to minimizing themselves, have not been part of, you know, or even offered the boys club. I think that's part of it. Like even a feminine gay man is sort of shamed for not being part of a boys club, but he's also still being invited to the boys club.
I see.
Whereas like,
Yeah.
a cis woman wouldn't be, and never will be. And
Yeah.
maybe if they are, it's in like a very like not taking it too seriously kind of way.
Absolutely.
That's just kind of that's my first initial thought. I don't have like organized thoughts about that specifically. But I think it's different. Like I think that like I really appreciated the call from I believe it was Brian, because he talked about being a gay man and catching himself being misogynistic, because I think the thing about misogyny is it's a very central part of our culture, and it's something that
Absolutely.
even when you are not a cis het man, you will digest and exert. And yes, I think minimizing yourself is, definitely a very common um experience that women have. I can also see how it's a very common experience that a person who isn't straight or isn't cis or isn't cis would have, because we definitely live in a society that rewards cis het people. And so of course you're going to minimize yourself in your expressions because you know that they can be used against you. um
Yeah,
and
totally.
so yeah, but you know your life, I don't know your life.
Yeah, no. And I totally get that, and I get there's a ton of like, stuff when it comes to like careers and, careers that I believed were possible. I remember, entering a computer science and seeing there's like, 20 people in the class and only 2 women. And I think I definitely received that. I just think it's interesting because like socialization has like so many venues.
Hmm.
And so like professionally, I think I was definitely, adopted a lot of those sentiments. And then when it came to like, I guess interpersonal relations, I didn't, really adopt a lot of that kind of like, I guess, masculine behavior. And so I think, and also there's the, like 2, I guess, parts to it is, people giving you those messages and then you're receiving and internalizing it. So I think that I definitely was given those messages, even if I didn't internalize. And I don't know, I just kind of wanted to say my truth, I guess, about that.
Hmm.
And about, even being perceived as female. I remember in science classes, like 7th grade or whatever, 3rd day, teacher still didn't get people's names, and she called me like young lady in the blue, and I was like, what? Me?
Hmm.
And I get that like being read as something isn't, exactly walking through the earth is that, but
Yeah.
there was definitely a period of time in my life where I was, called ma'am and stuff, and it was like, what? And it's just so, I guess, because also part of that is just feeling like detached. I think, a lot of, at least I can speak for like, gay men and, also a lot of lesbian friends I know who are like detached almost from their gender because of that. And so I feel like it's this almost like weird place where it's like, I'm definitely, I'm not trans. I don't identify with that. But at the same time, it's like, do I even fully identify with, manhood because of all this kind of like, I guess, messaging that I've internalized and stuff. And it's just like, it's anyway, I guess what I'm just trying to say is it's just like a whole hot mess. And I related to a lot of what you said, even if, my experience is definitely very much different from yours.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I think there's interesting things to ponder there. So thank you for giving me your true tea. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna.
absolutely. I'm not going to waste your time anymore. Oh, sorry.
Oh, so you did not waste my time. You added. There's lots to ponder there. I like when people just make me think. So I'm like, you know,
Oh, yeah.
there's things to unpack there.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, thank you so
I've
much for
listened to you since
calling.
middle school, and now I'm in
Oh,
college, and it's kind of crazy.
oh, thank
So, yeah,
you.
thank you so much.
All right,
Yeah, thank you.
bye. All right, so, I don't know how much you guys heard of that phone call, but like I have, I have to. So I have medicine that's supposed to be available to my pharmacy um at 4:30. So I will be here probably at least until 4:20ish. Cuz I'm getting on a plane tomorrow morning. I'm going on a road trip with Victor. If you guys keep up with the partners that I mentioned on here. And I'm really excited about it. Um and we haven't seen each other in like 2 years. So super excited. Anyway, let's get another caller. Hello.
Hi,
Hey there. Who am I talking to?
Shaw.
Hey, Sean.
SHA. Shaw.
Shaw. SHA.
Yes, correct.
I think that's like a ruler in some language, right?
I'm not sure,
A
honestly.
Shaw. Anyway, what is your true tea?
I guess I just wanted to speak to my experience as a Black trans woman with disabilities, um, and kind of how that shapes my existence in these conversations. especially, I guess, the example being Caitlyn Jenner. I
Mm-hmm.
think my experience is so divorced from that
Of
that I
course.
don't really interact with older white trans women. But I think just because you don't benefit from male privilege doesn't mean you can't perpetuate it. And I think that we see that when we, as a Black woman watching YouTube, consuming content, like when I see other Black women and their ability to be transphobic or harmful, and even as a Black trans woman, like my privilege in not necessarily having to think about those things growing up, what I say to people who I have ADD and I'm dyslexic, but I'm not on the spectrum. So I can't speak to those people's experiences. In terms of like intersectional things like that. But I think like in a lot of my relationships with gay white men and white women, like the micro and macro aggressions that even though you're not conservative, even though you're not an older person, when you say and do things that are harmful, there's really not an acknowledgement of it because I'm an activist, I'm queer myself. Like that's not really an excuse, I guess. Does that make sense?
I guess. Can you explain the last point a bit more?
I just feel like in my relationships with a lot of people, like even like white gay men or Black gay men, they say things about your as a Black trans in your body, like oh, you're whether you choose to wear a wig. I've listened to white trans women say like, oh, you're not a woman, like you're a cross-dresser if you choose to wear a wig. But culturally, Black women wear wigs.
Yeah.
We're kind of innovators, and it's something that's so much a part of us. And then I see also the same side of that when white women decide to wear wigs or extensions, it doesn't invalidate their womanhood in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an interesting difference where a lot of times, you know, in a trans context, when you're trying to work within, you know, maybe these very insular trans groups, the ways that a Black trans woman will express her femininity for some people is like, it's not seen as genuine because it's very common for Black women to like wear wigs and other sort of things that on a white person would be seen as you know, if a white like a lot of white how to say this, trying to figure out the delicate ways to talk about this, like there's ways that a lot of white people, white trans women who are just starting out would express their femininity, like wearing a wig and things like that. It's, you know, before they've grown out their hair, that really self-loathing transphobic trans people will say, well, that's just basically you being a cross-dresser, you're not there yet. And then when a Black person does it, you know, that, which, you know, black women do, like you said, innovators of it, it's sometimes conflated, even though that's not the case at all. But
I also feel like I don't know, I feel like you, with the previous caller, the person who you read their comment, it's like, I know that you're excited to have this kind of like discourse and conversation, but as a Black trans woman, I know physically the spaces, the straight spaces I take up, the queer spaces I take up, we navigate them very differently.
Yeah,
and even
absolutely.
though I have a lot of privilege, even I guess audibly, I'm cocky or whatever, but physically, I don't really have those same struggles as, you know, street harassment or where I can go or where I'm accepted. I kind of just move through the world. And I feel like even though I have those experiences, me being a Black woman, those aren't necessarily, those little privileges don't really I guess, shape me as I like have an advantage as a young trans woman or someone who's transitioned young. I transitioned at 18 out of high school. I went to an all women's art college. But I think in those ways I can relate to you and the content that you make, but I can't relate to I guess like a ContraPoints. Like I don't really follow them, or even though I agree with them and understand a lot of what they're saying, it's just not applicable to me.
Yeah, I get that.
Feeling.
I get that. That's been my general feeling with I mean most trans creators. It's like it's not applicable to me. Like this isn't at all like my experience at all. Um, you know, which I think, like I said at the top of this, I had a thought about race because I noticed that when I do talk to older transitioners, I pretty much never am talking to um a person of color. It's almost always a white person. Almost always.
Right. And I don't think people really critically think about, yes, you're a trans person, but what are the other facets of your identity that contribute to oppressing others? Like just because you're an effeminate gay white man, I mean, who are you in reality in the world, who are you being oppressed by besides straight white men? I guess people who have less privilege in the sense where you're lower on the totem pole. It's like when I step out into the world, into workplaces, it's like you're the threat to your well-being and to your physical person and to is a real thing. It's not a figment or that someone's being rude, or like I'm also from New York, so I don't care, people are being rude or insensitive, but when people, not that I experience it a lot, but as a Black trans woman, it's a reality that like someone tomorrow somebody can take my life. And I'm really powerless in, I guess, the simple way that I present and show up in the world as a Black woman. I simply don't have that ability to command a respect or like not even respect, just like a human decency in some spaces, in job interviews, in the workplace, in educational environment.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely like that's I think sometimes that's a bit of my I don't even want to say problem because it's not really a problem, but when I talk to older white late transitioners, um they there's this whole layer of conversation we're not having about race and about how like if I didn't transition, you know, we would still be having that conversation about race. It would still be
Right.
this issue. And I do think that sometimes people aren't aware of like I think privilege when you have it can be hard to see. I think it's often
Right.
really, 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 really hard to see your own privilege. Which is part of why I like to think about my own privilege a lot because I want to be aware of it and not ignorant of it. And I will say that there are definitely like some conversations I've had with later in life older transitioners who are usually white, and I don't even know if they fully see it. I don't even know if they see like you like there's a complete other there's you and I are interacting in this world in like a really different way, a very very
Right.
different way. And even
That's not that other people's experiences aren't real, but that affect us socioeconomically, that affect us in deep ways. I think it's the same kind of like white feminist girl boss thing where yes, you're a woman, but you're still perpetuating this kind of male patriarchal ideals and talking points. Like a lot of the Candace Owens and the Blair Whites, it's like you're just regurgitating these Fox News talking points, and even in the Caitlyn Jenner interview, it's like these aren't original thoughts. You're not reinventing the wheel. You're just using language by white men that was invented by white men to invalidate others, so you can have a place to function in the world.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely true with all those people. It's you're definitely just replicating white male patriarchal views of shit. And it's I mean,
right, whether you're aware of it or not, whether you're being like as sincere as possible. Like, I guess what really made me think about that was like the person who left the comment talking about like what they were able to save up and do and adopting a child. And as somebody who transitioned at 18, like I like and hasn't been able, like you said, to really I guess work real jobs. I've been a student for most of my adult life, but like I don't, like in terms of like getting care credit for surgeries and navigating being able to do certain like adult, even saving up a nest egg to like have a family. Like those aren't things that you think about when you're thinking about survival as a teenager. You know, and like, it is very life or death, like you said.
Yeah, like I haven't even vaguely thought about saving up money for a family. Like I'm like,
right,
yeah, let me pay this rent though, you know. Like,
right, exactly. It's like, am I going to be able to survive into the next month, you know?
Like I can barely, and I was trying to communicate that with Audrey. It's like there's some people have literally never been able to even think of saving. They've never, you know, been able to consider
or have
putting money
access
aside
to having a bank account. Like, I'm privileged to do that, you know? And so many people aren't, you know?
Yeah. It's a very different scenario. And you know, it is a hard conversation to have because you know, I don't ever want to minimize people's, you know, stuff. Because everyone,
and I'm not doing that in any way.
I don't think you are at all either.
Utmost respect for, you know, her and her journey and her opinions and her reality. I don't walk in her shoes, and I have sympathy and empathy for her. But I think it's often hard for people in those situations to have sympathy and empathy to really understand and feel for somebody, because I guess as a Black person growing up in a Black neighborhood in a Black family, like I think my life would have, I don't know about like girlhood, but I think my adolescence would have been extremely different if I grew up in a white family, in a white middle class family, in a white neighborhood. I think I would have not felt the need to diminish myself and my gender and my person, because I have the privilege. I think that's what we see with a lot of white people in the community in general. Like they have the privilege to just like not give a fuck. Even the white men who date Black trans women, it's like you have the privilege to, you know, not give a fuck. And whereas, you know, DL Black men don't have that privilege.
Yeah, and I try to point that out, that's like a central thing. Like white men are privileged enough to where, maybe someone will say some shit to them, but like at the end of the day, they're white men in America. You know, there's, you know, Black men have to really think about like if this person is, you know, and this is definitely not to make any fucking excuses or defenses for Black men, but like, you know, Black men do have to consider like, all right, I'm a Black man in America dealing with all these other things, and you know, I can't really also stomach the ostracism. I can never say this word. How being with a trans woman could potentially ostracize me, from my community.
And not to make any excuses, because I feel like if you want to perpetuate that, and if you want to live your life in that way, that's great. I choose not to interact with it.
Oh, me too. I still see it as cowardice personally. But you know.
And then I have a lot of relationships with Black men. My father is is an amazing Black man who loves and supports and accepts me. And my brother-in-law is an amazing Black man who loves and supports and accepts me and fights for people like me outside of our relationship. So I don't think like it's all Black people, all Black men, or even all white people and all white men. I think those who are able to be just a little more critical about their circumstances and other people's lived experiences and circumstances, I think we'll be able to have more understanding, nuanced conversation. I think for people like Caitlyn Jenner, it's like that's not going to pay the bills, so they're not interested in doing that work. Or they've never been that person, and transitioning isn't going to make them want to do that work, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. You have such good true tea. Your true tea is so good. This brew, girl.
I never do this. I never like hold in a comment. So I was a little nervous. I woke up from a nap, so I'm like a little disoriented, but I'm glad we got to talk. And I'm glad I got to, say hi and be a part of this.
Yeah. I really loved your true tea. We are getting closer and closer to the end, so I'm gonna take another caller, but thank you so much for coming and sharing your brew with us. We really appreciate it.
Have a good one. Thank you so much.
You too. Bye. Oh, that brew. Oh, so good. Oh, I'm just so full of tea. I've been drinking for so long. We've been here for 3 hours. Oh my God. So I know that Laquette keeps saying that I should answer. So on my end, I don't see who's calling. It's all random. And I've got like 20 people now on the line. Like I said, I'm gonna go till like 4 like 20-ish, maybe 4:25, because my prescription's gonna be ready at 4:30. Like I said, I'm already having a pretty clear idea of who I'm gonna have in the final cut of the podcast. So yeah, we'll take a couple more callers, and hopefully I'll have this edited today and up and uploaded and everything today. We'll see. I'm trying to edit a video for you guys for tomorrow, because I'm gonna be fucking out of here. So yeah, actually, let me check my email really quickly, because my boyfriend, he broke his phone and he told me he'd email me when he's coming down here, which, okay, he's not. Okay, good. I haven't gotten nothing from him, because it would have been funny if I was just waiting. I was just letting him wait. Anyway, next caller. Hello. Hello.
Hello?
Hey there.
Hello?
Hi.
Oh, hi. Hi. There's like a delay, so I didn't feel, hello. Wow,
Oh.
I'm so glad that I got on.
Yeah. Are you listening? You're using just your phone? Yeah, you're not listening to the stream at the same time?
Yeah. I was listening to the stream on my computer, but anyway, yeah, hi.
Hi.
I'm Lucid. I'm a trans dude from Minnesota.
Oh, Minnesota.
And oh yeah. Yeah, I'm originally from northern Minnesota, but I'm living down in the Twin Cities right now. But
nice.
Anyway, yeah, so I just wanted to call in because I think I sort of have an interesting experience in that I'm sort of like the opposite of you in that like my parents let me dress like very masculinely for as long as I can remember. Like the only time I remember wearing a dress is when I was like maybe 4 years old or something. And my entire life, like growing up, I was like mistaken for a boy, like quote marks. You know, so in a way, like I did experience some male socialization. And in a way, I think, even though I was telling everyone I was a girl or whatever, I think I was actually experiencing some male privilege, and just that, I would always have to like correct people when I like met them. I'd be like, oh, I'm actually a girl or what, even though it felt really wrong. And yeah, not to ramble on too much, but I think like some experiences I had, like I didn't really worry about my looks as much. Like I didn't worry about getting ready in the morning. I could always get ready in like 5 or 10 minutes. I could do really well in math and science, and I felt like I didn't really have my intelligence questioned at all. And also, and I think two really big things that I experienced because of that was I wasn't really afraid to like walk around at night. Like that wasn't that was something that surprised me when other girls told me that when I was like in middle school or whatever. Like because I would like, all my friends were boys too, so like we would run around be little hooligans, right? Doing whatever at night. So that was one thing. And as I got older, like I didn't fear like getting catcalled or anything like that. And then this is what I think is probably the biggest thing. I was not raised in a way where I feel like I need to please men.
Oh, that's good. Thank God for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That takes years to unlearn.
Nice. And that's something that like talking to like cis women I know and trans women I know, and just non-binary folks, like just a lot of people, that was a really big thing that they were socialized to do, was to please men, to always like sort of concede, to always worry about men's emotional states and whatnot. And I just didn't pick that up because in a way I was sort of socialized as a boy, even though it's kind of interesting how I was socialized, because I was sort of in this middle gray area, because I was always mistaken for a boy, but I wasn't a boy. But yeah, so I guess what I think that says is like, like the people, like you talked about, like younger trans girls, like I don't think they have that experience. But I do think it would be fair to say that like trans women who did wait a really long time to transition, and like, the person you were talking about who's like a bodybuilder or whatever, I doubt that she was really socialized to like please men in the way that like cis women were socialized. So yeah. I feel like I just said a lot, but that, I think that was sort of the biggest thing that I felt, was that like I think if you weren't socialized to please men, I think that is a really big privilege that people should acknowledge.
Yeah, and that's so true, and I thank you for pointing that out, because that is a really central part of a lot of young women's experiences, where like they're told, like the caller earlier who mentioned brothers and sisters having different socialization. They'll teach the girl to cook, not because it's a thing that she should know for her survival as like a person in this world. They teach her to cook so that she could find a husband. That's what it's all about. And a lot of women are raised hearing that all the time. Everything that they do, everything that they learn about themselves, everything that they do about putting themselves together is all kind of about getting a man and being with a man and making sure that you are put together enough so that a man is satisfied with you. And that is like a very alienating experience to have. Yeah, that's a really, really huge point. So I'm actually really curious, because for me, the turfy, every all trans women have male privilege conversation is always fascinating to me, because I actually TERFs, I find don't talk frequently about trans men and how they fit into that particular conversation, like
Yeah.
at all. And I'm always fascinated by that, because so I just saw this today, but Rose McGowan got really upset with I forget someone else, I forget the person's name, but they used the term birthing people or birthing humans, and Rose McGowan got really up in arms about it and said, why are you so afraid to say biological women in a desire to placate to trans women and da 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 da. And it was so funny to me because, like, literally birthing people does not include or reference trans women. It's talking about people who share biology with people who were designated female at birth. And so I'm so curious about, like, how you as a trans guy feel about that sort of stuff, because, it's I don't know, it's been interesting for me to, like, observe exclusionary / gender critical folks, just totally look over, um, you know, reproductive rights for trans men or for non-binary folks who were designated female at birth. Very curious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I mean, for one thing, I think that I'm lucky in that I like haven't really, I've kind of only really tangentially heard about like turf discourse and stuff. I haven't experienced a lot of it firsthand myself. But I think, and this sort of comes into just like, I mean, how general like transphobic people treat trans people is like trans women are sort of seen as these like encroachers who are like sort of like trying to take these spaces, whereas like trans guys were like poor misguided women who have been just taken over by the
gender radicals
or whatever, and yeah, and we just need to save our poor girls, like these poor innocent girls. So I think in a way it's like sort of the demonization and hate gets spewed at the trans women, and then the trans guys, just sort of get on the side. Like, I feel like they almost think like if they win somehow, whatever winning would mean, but like if they win, then like, oh, those people won't feel the need to like, try to access male privilege because it like won't matter. But it's like, no, no, like that's not why I'm trans. So yeah, I guess those are sort of my thoughts.
I actually totally forgot about like the fact that there's that whole book going around right now about detransitioning. It's like a whole thing, and lost women are lost lesbian sisters and all that stuff. It's just lots of heavy fucked up, like very insidious misgendering shit. Totally forgot about that. I can't believe that I actually like forgot about that, because that's a huge thing right now. Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, that book is horrible.
I've actually avoided getting too deep into the discourse around that book, because like I just there's just something that like just it's like they've combined like so much misogyny and shittiness in like a desire to invalidate trans people, specifically trans men, and as a way of protecting women. And it's such a weird, insidiously fucked up, like upsetting thing. And it's, I gotta have a couple drinks before I look at it.
Yeah. Well, no, and it's sort of interesting because I mean, if you're like thinking about it from like a transphobe's perspective, because people claim they're feminists, they claim they want like equality, but then if you're treating trans women as like the perpetrators who are like actively doing something, and then trans men as like the passive actors, they see trans women as men and trans men as women, then you're reinforcing the idea that women are passive actors and men are like the only ones who can really like do anything. So it's like it's all misogyny.
It's all misogyny. And I've often felt that way, where it's like I actually can't tell if like, well, I mean, I can kind of tell sometimes, but I can't tell if the argument that a lot of them are making is that like they want for women to be in like a subservient place in society, or if they're actively trying to, you know, destroy that idea that they are. Because half of the arguments that I'm hearing are people who are assigned female at birth are lesser and deserve to and need to be, you know, need to assimilate to this gender, or else there's something wrong with them, or they're confused, or da 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 da. And like, that's just like, it's transphobic, but it's like a hugely misogynistic like thing that also is directly tied to very conservative ideas of gender. And Jesus Christ, it's just misogyny. It's just misogyny.
Yeah.
Well, go on.
Oh no, yeah, I was just saying that. Yeah, no, I think it's I'm not really sure what I was saying.
It's okay.
Yeah, I know you.
It's okay. Well, I'm really, really glad that you called, because I think you really rounded out this conversation quite well. There's so many you know, because like I pointed out in the conversation earlier in the podcast, like we only seem to be talking about trans women. Like these conversations are always obsessively focused on trans women. You know, trans men also exist. I don't know how half of this shit fits into, you know, what you're saying about this stuff, but trans men also exist. So, you know, because the argument with a lot of this entitlement stuff, like a lot of the male privilege argument comes from this argument of entitlement. You know, this argument that people are entitled to, they, of course, they see trans women as men. They're like, men are entitled to being women, and that's why they're doing this and they're doing that, and all this transitioning and surgeries and wanting to be in in women's sports is all just like male entitlement personified. And it's ridiculous. Yeah, and well, to me, it's like, okay, but like trans men want similar things. They would like to also be, you know, seen as valid and valuable in society, and also be able to participate in sports if that's what they want to do. And it's not this one-sided the trans women are doing it, who are men, by the way, sort of situation. There are two sides to this. There's multiple sides, but you know, trans men exist, and people who transition the other way, in quotations, also are advocating for their own stuff. So I'm really thankful that you called, because it's a good perspective to have in addition to the ones we've had already.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad I could round out this conversation, and I'm very glad to share my brew with everyone.
Ooh, yes, thank you for sharing your brew with us. I'm gonna hang up, because I'm gonna end out the show. But thank you so much for calling. I really, really appreciate it. What was your name again?
Lucid.
Lucid. Okay.
Like lucid dreaming.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, bye. Thank you so much for calling.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right, guys. It is 4:30. I absolutely need to go and run and get this prescription. I'm definitely gonna I don't know when, if my day is productive, I will be able to do many things today. Can this be a thing again? Yes, this is my plan is to have this be a thing every week, where we do a call-in show related to the True Tea episode of that week. I thought this was really productive, and we had some really, really great conversations. So I'm super happy and super grateful for all the people who called in. You guys are fucking badass. So yeah, I'm gonna run, guys. But thank you so much for coming and joining me here. I'm really sorry that I couldn't take other calls. I feel really, really bad about that. But we've been live for 3.5 hours, so I think it's time. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.